Okay, welcome to the Kaysville City Planning Commission meeting for May 23, 2019. First item on our agenda is the approval of minutes for May 5. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from May 5th.
I'll second.
Aye.
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 Great. Next, conditional use permit for a major home occupation B for construction handyman at 983 South Viewcrest Lane for Ronald Gazasvi. Gazasvi. That sounds better. Gazasvi sounds better. I like that one. Okay.
Okay, I talked to Ronald. He is got a day job, but he wants to start a handyman job on the side. He's mostly just gonna do drywall repair. So all he has to pick up a few hand tools in the back of his truck, and pretty much the only sign that he'll have that he has anything around his house is just a pickup with tools that's inside the bed. So he won't have anything really, trailers or materials dumped off or any items displayed outside. We recommend that, staff recommends that we grant him a conditional use permit for an occupation B for drywall repair and handyman services without the need of any additional conditions.
Great. Thank you. I'm guessing the applicant is here. Do we have any questions? Discussion? Would you like to say something? Here. Okay.
Will you have any employees?
Why don't you come up?
Oh.
Why don't you come up and state your name and put you on
I'm
record?
Ronald Gazafy, Ron. I do drywall for the last 25 years, and I always have neighbors ask me, hey, can you do repairs for me? So in order to do it properly, you got to have insurance. So that's the whole purpose of getting the license. So I can tell them yes, because my wife, they know I do it, so I might as well help them. And I don't want to help them and get in trouble. So that's why it is. It's minor repair work, a hole in the wall, or maybe help them with a bathroom or something like that. But no major construction. Anytime I deliver material would be on the site, a couple of sheets of sheetrock, nothing ever at the property where I live. It's always going to be at the premise of where I do the work and dispose of the same way out of my back of my truck in a day.
Okay.
Never dumpsters on site, anything like that.
Okay, great. Yeah, as you can imagine, the primary concern is how it affects the neighbors and the neighborhood. So if there aren't any signs that you're doing this or any indications, equipment, trailers, etc., then you'll probably...
I'm not trying to promote it. I just,
Yeah.
people ask me, and if they want to do it, then that's fine. I want to do it, but I want to make sure I'm covered. I don't want to hit a water line and then have to fork all that out of my own pocket and get in trouble.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Well, we appreciate the compliance with the city ordinance as well. So, any other questions or concerns? All right. We'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we grant a conditional use permit for major home occupation B, construction handyman and drywall repair for Ron Gazafy at 983 South Viewcrest Drive.
I'll second. Aye.
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 Aye. Okay. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Next is, let's see. Is it a conditional use permit? I'm not on track here. Okay. Next is conditional use permit for major home occupation B, group swimming lessons for Carmine Hill at 388 North Angel Street.
Okay, Cammy Hill has been teaching lessons there for a while, several years back. She lives on Angel Street, 388 North Angel's corner house, right off of Phillips there. They got a swimming pool. They have plenty of parking, and she wants to teach small classes, usually 1 to 4 people, never exceeding 8. And she wants to be Monday through Friday, 9 to 1 p.m. classes. They'll always end, and she'll never have classes overlap or anything. So the cars will come, leave. come later, leave. They have ample parking, and I recommend, or the staff recommends, that she's allowed to have her home occupation be, and no stipulations other than no more than 8 per class.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, is there any discussion? Is the applicant here? Okay, great, thank you. Questions, discussion?
I have none.
All right, if we're feeling good about it, let's have a motion.
Make a motion to grant a conditional use permit for major home occupation B, group swimming lessons at 388 North Angel Street, with the stipulation of a limit per class size of 8.
Second.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
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 great, thank you. Good luck. All right, next is a conditional use permit for development signs, an extension, Symphony Homes at 92 North Flint Street.
These signs have been on Flint Street at 92 North for the past year. They want to remain for 6 more months. They're using that house still as a model home. Those 2 signs, the small one is 4x4. The larger one is 4x8. They're about 2 feet off the ground, so it's 6 feet. And I think that other one's 10 feet off the ground. They are been there for the past year. They haven't seemed to cause any grievance or problems with traffic, view, or anything. And I'm recommending that they're allowed to stay for 6 more months or until the model home there is sold.
Okay.
So the longest they would be there is 6 months, so either.
That's how long this extension's going for.
Okay.
Yeah, 6 months.
At 6
whichever
months,
is-
they'll be back here if.
Whichever is sooner, right?
Okay.
yeah.
Do we know how many remaining houses there are?
No, I think they're just using this for a model home for that old orchard subdivision, and they're probably using it for just a model home for. They have several subdivisions in Kaysville, so they're just using it probably to show for all the subdivisions.
Yeah, when this one was approved, most recently the Old Orchard subdivision, I just pulled up here on Google Maps on the screen. This image is dated a little bit, but you can see how many homes are in construction on this area. There are not very many lots left at that particular one. But they're also starting the Preserve subdivision just off of Angel Street. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that there's some interest until they have a model home on site there that this could bridge use for that. So they may be back in 6 months to ask that it be longer, but for now that's the cap we wanted to put on them while they're finishing up old.
Is that
That's
is
fine.
that Phillips just right there? Okay, yeah, I remember that. Okay.
Okay. Any discussion? We want to go for, I'll take a motion then to,
Make a motion that we grant a conditional use permit for development signs at 92 North Flint Street for Symphony Homes.
I'll second.
do we need this
Oh, the
6 months
month?
thing, or is that
Oh, do
part
I
of
need
the,
to add 6 months?
is that part of the
It's okay to be clear for us if that's what the motion is.
For
So
6
If you want to
months.
restate that, 6 months?
6 months or until.
or until the last unit
So that'll be
sold?
fine. Oh, okay, for 6 months or until the last unit is sold.
Okay.
Find that page.
Whichever is sooner, right? Okay.
And I'll second that again.
Aye.
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 Okay. Next is Tyler Estates Phase 3, second amended subdivision, preliminary and final plat.
Okay.
McRae and Sheila Baxter at 1048 Tyler's Way.
So we put it on the agenda altogether, but I'll say at the end of my remarks, after we've held the hearing and any comments or questions, we'll be looking for a couple different motions from you, the preliminary plat and final plat separately, and I'll try and remind you of that. But you may remember as a commission, we addressed this very recently through a rezone process. The property was previously an RA, a residential agricultural piece. It's ample in size, but due to some frontage issues, it was rezoned in R110. The concept that was provided during that process showed typically you need 200-foot frontages to accommodate 2 lots in an RA zone. This allowed them to do an 80-foot and 90-foot frontage based on the way our ordinances read, but still have lots. I'm going to get the number wrong, but it's roughly 1.5 acres, so well under the 2 unit per acre type development. And this is just a subdivision preliminary and final plat following up on that rezone process. So you can see what was proposed here on the screen during the rezone. Here's the plat. It's very much consistent with what was proposed. It meets all the minimum lot size, frontage, and setback requirements based on the existing buildings on site. Again, ultimately what it does is it accommodates the building. You can see here on the 90-foot, the existing home, but there's also another building that's that long kind of white roof that's more of a garage building currently that he hopes to convert into a second home. So that's the purpose for the new lot. All public right-of-way improvements are already in place with the cul-de-sac, asphalt, curb gutter, sidewalk, and the like, so no changes to that. Just gets utilities to a new lot. And so with that, as staff, we're ready to recommend approval of the preliminary plat. We would look from you a recommendation on the preliminary plat. Ultimately, the City Council still has final approval on that, but assuming you're on board with that, we would recommend approval of the final plat coming directly from you as the final approval for that as it complies with the zoning and engineering.
Great, thank you. You mentioned a public hearing, but we don't have a public hearing on this, do we?
Yeah, so this one, we do typically look for comments, public hearing on it because of the preliminary plat. If there's not a lot on this one, but that's where we'll look for input on street network or other comments from the public if there's reason to do that. So,
and this was it noticed as a public hearing?
Yeah, so we've put up signage and notice on the property as that, so.
Okay. All right, well then, do we need any preliminary discussion? Should I open up? Okay, we'll open it up for a public hearing on this item. Is there anyone here that would like to say anything on this item? Okay, we'll close the public hearing.
I think this is pretty consistent with what was before us before, and City Council approved the recommendation we made previously, and so me personally, I don't see any problem with going ahead with it, recommending the approval of them.
Agreed.
And so we're going to do 2 different motions. One would be a motion for approval, recommend approval of the preliminary plat, and then at the risk of jumping the gun, approving the final plat if approved by the city, conditioned upon the approval of the City Council.
Exactly.
Okay. Well,
I would make a motion that we approve the preliminary plat for Tyler Estates, or I guess in this case, we're recommending approval, is that right?
On the preliminary plat is the recommendation, that's correct.
Yeah. We are recommending approval, preliminary plat approval for Tyler Estates Phase 3, second amended subdivision, located at 1048 Tyler's Way, as presented, with the indication from the staff that it meets all of the applicable requirements.
I'll second.
Aye.
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 aye. Okay, next, motion on the, conditioned upon the City Council approval of the preliminary plat, a final plat approval.
in this case, are we the final approval?
We are.
Yes.
Of plat?
But it's got
All
to be
right.
conditioned on the city
And I would
council.
make the motion to approve the final plat for Tyler Estates Phase 3 Second Amended Subdivision at 1048 Tyler Way, with the condition, or on the basis, that the city council approves the preliminary plat.
I'll second that also.
Okay, well, if you're,
Aye.
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 Great, thank you. Okay, next is a public hearing for the rezone of .65 acres of property at 500 North Main Street from general commercial to residential multifamily, included with the PRUD overlay zone.
Okay. I'll give a brief introduction to this, Mr. Chair, and for the Planning Commission, those present. The applicant is here this evening. They can give further detail on what he would hope to do with the project should this be pursued further. And then just as stated, a reminder that it is a public hearing this evening. But to bring it up, the property on the north end of Main Street, it's across the street essentially from the Bruff Realty office, not too far off of Mutton Hollow, and I'm going to get the street wrong, but Creekside Lane. The property, you can tell, is fairly narrow but deep along Main Street, and so with that encompasses just a little over half an acre at .65 acres. Looking at the zoning map, if you can see there in the middle of the screen, there's an outline. The property is currently one of the red general commercial zoned properties. Surrounding it are some R2, it's a two-family dwelling type development with the cottages at Hyde Park, a lot of R18, single-family residential in gray, and there's a few smatterings of the RM, which is the requested zone, that residential multifamily throughout the area. Ultimately, and again, I'll let the applicant speak to this further, but the request would be, there's an existing home on site, ultimately to redevelop, to do a more dense type development for residential units. The RM district itself, for every 2,800 square feet of property that you have. So if you do it in an apartment type setting or a townhome or what, we have different options of how they can develop the property, and he'll speak maybe to his desired use for the property. It could be about 15.5 units per acre of density. He's not quite got a full acre, so I ought to have had it here in the report, and maybe it is, but you're going to be shy of approximately 10 units, I suspect, that could fit on the property based on the requested zoning. Of course, the zoning would be first, and should the type of use be desirable, we would further pursue it with the subdivision process to follow. I think the applicant is looking for some direction and guidance from the commission this evening on, if the use is desired. And Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we'd be happy to provide more details and come back if needed. That would be my recommendation, is if the Planning Commission is interested in entertaining the rezone, especially with the PRUD overlay element, would be to give direction to come back so we could form a development agreement to get more specific on what that actually feels and looks like, should that be desired. Finally, ultimately what we're looking for from the Planning Commission this evening is a recommendation. So again, this ultimately goes to the City Council, who gets the final say. So you're welcome to make a decision tonight, table for more information, recommend approval or denial to the City Council, and then there would always be that next step just for your reminder and for the neighbors here, so they're aware of the process. I'll conclude my comments there and just be happy to take any questions or later on, should the commission have any, and turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there anything that merits discussion before we open up the public hearing? Any clarification or particular issue that needs to be addressed that you know of?
Perhaps procedurally, what I'll just mention, and the commission will bear with me, as you guys know this, but for the comments of the public, it's a completely discretionary decision of ultimately the City Council as to whether or not this is the right thing to do. So there's a lot of preference based in this, but looking at the general plan, higher density would typically be along major streets. Also, commercial is kind of slated to be along major streets, and Main Street certainly qualifies as that. So there's a lot of judgment in does it meet the general plan and some of those intentions, or is it the right thing for the area? So it gives you quite a range of ways to look at that as to what makes sense and what's right for this site. So we'll leave it up to you and your judgment based on the input you get this evening.
Thank you. All right, well, I will open up the public hearing on this item. If anyone is here that would like to provide some input on this, please come forward and state your name.
Yes, I'm Lauren Pitt. I live at 490 North Main, a lot adjacent to this one. And I highly recommend that the city deny this request. Because you see, my property and the others are commercial. They have been for over 35 years. This ground has been designated for commercial for future development for Kaysville. We all know that they're running out of commercial areas that we can build on. You can see that 4th West and North Main Street is about the very few open areas for commercial development. I think the housing would not fit in this area. I don't want to have apartments or condominiums next to me. It would also affect my property valuation because I'm commercial, and if in the future I wanted to sell, it would be better if all the area was commercial there. I just feel that it is not appropriate for this area, and it's not a wise decision for the city to start changing commercial areas to residential areas. When they start building houses, as you can see across the street, if that property had all been built into houses, we wouldn't have any of those businesses there. And you can see several other places, if they had developed it into housing, there wouldn't be any businesses. Right now, I think the corridor of North Main Street is better wisely kept and reserved for commercial development, for future businesses that can come into the area. And you've got pleasant businesses, I suggest like Tasty Donuts and some of those places can fit in those size of lots that we have on our side of the street, and they're not invasive to the area. But I think Kaysville City really needs to consider this and not approve this request and reserve this area for future commercial development, which I think the city needs in the long run, because they're running out of land that's for commercial development. They're just not getting that much. In the city, if you look at the whole city view, very little of it is actually for commercial development, and the main part of it is this area on North Main. So I, again, strongly suggest that the city does not approve this zone change from commercial to residential. There's plenty of other areas that they can build residential without having to take up this commercial area. Thank you for your time.
Let me ask you one question. So what's your commercial use there? Which lot did you say you are? Right. North?
South of it. Yes.
South.
On this lot right here, I have a shop here in the back. I had a machine shop business going here for 30 years. I closed it down, I've retired, and now I don't have the shop as a business anymore. I don't have a business license. I just have my equipment there in my own building, but you can see I've developed it, and I was one of the original ones that signed to have this ground zone commercial. And that was one of the reasons is that I could put a machine shop there. But anyway, if there's any other questions, that's, I've had 3-phase power put into it. Like I said, it's been used for commercial for quite a few years, but not the last probably 6 or 8.
Okay.
I have a question. So is that your house right there also?
Yeah.
So it's your house and then you had a commercial business behind it?
I'll point again. Yes. This is my house right here.
Okay.
My detached garage. And this is my shop back here in the back.
Okay.
Our lots are almost equal in size.
Okay, so my question is, since it's zoned general commercial, did they have to, what did they do in order to be able to build a house there years
The
ago?
house was there before it was.
Oh, and then it was rezoned
Yes.
afterwards?
I say I was
Okay.
one of the original ones.
Okay,
Living along that whole side of the street, all of us signed up to be commercial
okay.
at the time, and I was one of the original ones that signed for it all to be zoned commercial there.
So when
Doesn't general commercial allow for a residence if it's part of the supporting the business or?
Yeah, there is some allowance for resident. There's some pretty rare circumstances where it exists. Mainly these homes exist just as non-conforming because they predate and grandfathered in
Okay.
before the ordinance. So, yeah, you'll see that as he stated that, to my recollection and knowledge, nearly all of these homes on that east side of 200 or Main Street are still used as residential, but when they cease that use, then it should switch to a commercial
Okay.
use.
I wanted to point out one other thing too that's happened. This area right here used to all be commercial also. There was an attorney's office in this old house. When they sold it, they rezoned it and they changed this to residential, these back 3 lots. And they have proceeded to build homes there now. And they're monsters. They're probably meeting the tall height that they can build there. They're intrusive, right on our border, looking into our property. These neighbors have the same problem. If you go and look at it, it's just a mess the way they put the houses in there. But because the zone, we were told originally, when Reba wanted to do that, it was going to be single level, single family homes. So I didn't put up a stink about it, but it got changed. Now they're multi-level homes, and they're just too obtrusive to the area.
Okay,
And then they've lost all that potential commercial ground that was there. And so if we start going down the street, I'm an island there now. With my commercial lot, if this is developed into residential, then I'm stuck as an island. If I have somebody that wants to buy my place and use the shop for commercial use, there we go, you know,
Yeah.
have problems.
Okay.
great.
So that's why I'm very interested in not zoning this other area residential.
Great, thank you, I appreciate your comments. Anyone else here to address this item? Please come forward, state your name, thank you.
My name's Sharon Hadley, and we live on the north side, on the other opposite side of this. And we live in the cottages at Hyde Park, so we're up there. And at the time that we bought that property, we were concerned because we have property both on the north and on the west side of us. And they told us it was commercially zoned, which concerned me a little bit when we started, but as they explained to us, it probably would be small commercial, more like office buildings or even a small restaurant or something, but it wouldn't be anything that would be a big issue. And so we thought, well, this'll work out okay. And most of those kinds of businesses, they don't have a lot of business at night or on the weekends, unless it were a restaurant. But one of the things that our builder had done in this whole subdivision in Hyde Park is that we noticed that one thing that they took into consideration was privacy. And all those homes, although they only have 8-foot side yards, they do not have windows on one side. So you always have privacy on the side of your house where you have your big windows. Now in our home, our patio is right off of that property, and it looks right into our family room. And here again, a single story one probably wouldn't bother me as much. But if it's multi-story, we're going to be 16 feet from our neighbors looking in. And it's not that I'm not used to something like this. We spend a lot of our time overseas, and we have lived in high-rise apartments in big cities. But they were always designed in such a way that people couldn't see into your windows. They were laid out so that you still had those privacy issues, and we always appreciated that. I don't think that's possible to do on a piece of property this small. Our biggest concern, I think, though, is the multi-level. And I don't know that residential zoning, you can even ask not to have multi-level. But we would really prefer to see that it stays as a commercial zoning, just for the privacy issues. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Hi. Please come forward, thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Glenn Singleton, and I actually, concerning the property at 500 North Main Street, was under contract with the owner a few months back to purchase it. And in that time was when, during the inspection period, I learned from the Planning Commission here at Kaysville City that there would be no approval of any permit to add on to the property. It's abandoned by the owner, and because it's commercial zoning, you can't build onto that property or really do anything outside of what's already there, like that's already been discussed. But it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath home, very small, and it's been abandoned long enough that it needs quite a bit of renovation. So there's really, really that whole line of zoning, where it's all zoned commercial, there's no real purpose for it residentially. Besides the ones who already live there, the only permits that are approved are just to continue making it livable. But you can't really do any kind of updating or extensive renovations to these properties, according to the officials that I spoke with at that time here at Kaysville City. So the ultimate development of really that whole block of properties that are zoned commercial is absolutely necessary and is just getting closer. That property isn't the only one that's considered abandoned at this point, just mainly for that purpose. You can't really do much with the property besides live in it, but in terms of any kind of investor, they're looking to do that, you know, exactly, like build something on it, make it bigger. In this case, rezone it from commercial would, and I agree with the first resident who spoke, it would ultimately damage the rest of the values of the properties. At this point, for the owners of the properties, to renovate all of these and sell them to a commercial buyer who wants to renovate and build on that, not only would that be huge for Kaysville City, but it would be the most beneficial for the owners that currently have these properties. Because again, they're ultimately more and more useless for residential purposes. So, I mean, this is hopefully going to be an investment for them. And I'm kind of arguing, you know, for the seller as I got closer to the seller and just learning about the situation and whatnot. That's the point I want to make, is that it's for the sellers for the owners who live there now or own the properties. This is going to be an investment for them in the long run. If they're going to cherry pick these properties and sell and renovate, you know, one by one, then it's just going to hurt all the other ones as they go about that for that whole block. So ultimately, to rezone only one of these properties, leave the surrounding properties alone, that would hurt those property values, and really whatever kind of branding strategy that you know, this new multifamily unit would have is really just kind of more of a selfish claim for them, right? And the way, it just doesn't seem like it would work with all the surrounding properties, unless there was a bigger plan in motion to rezone multiple properties and kind of transform that stretch of the block. Ultimately, if we're just going to change one and rezone one, it's going to negatively affect all the other owners and diminish their investment in their properties, and just render it even more useless than it's already becoming because of the current zoning as it is. So their motive in the long run is going to be selling it to a commercial buyer when someone comes around and they want to take and actually make something out of this block. But if we're just going to take one, just like the first resident said, it will hurt the other properties, and I don't see how it could ultimately help even the one property in the long run, as the other ones were purchased. Because if someone bought the neighboring 2 properties and turned that into a single business that would dwarf the first one, then it's not gonna help them whenever that happens. But ultimately, even in the time that I was under contract with with the owner of that property, in talks with other investors who had their eye on that stretch, on that area, or similar areas, that's ultimately their plan, is to try to get more than one, or get as much of that block and renovate it, rather than just taking one. It is a good chunk of land, but it's very long and narrow, and so I just wanted to validate what the first resident said, is that it wouldn't be beneficial in the long run for the buyer, like whoever wants to do that renovation right now, but more importantly for the city, and whether or not you want to turn that whole thing into a larger residential complex, or just turn into a larger commercial complex. That would ultimately be the best, in my opinion, for Kaysville City, just for that entire area, and what kind of developments would benefit the city. So that's just something I wanted to validate what that first resident said, and it's not just a matter of someone who lives there and doesn't want that to happen, but just from someone who's also interested in the development of that area. It really wouldn't make sense just to take one, but to keep in the back of our minds what we want to do with that entire stretch of the land. Because if we're just going to sell piece by piece and have it renovated and just turn into what they want to make of it, it's going to turn into kind of a weird complex.
Okay.
Within a stretch of 100 yards, you're going to have a bunch of different types of businesses and whatnot. So it could just for the long run for the city, if we're just going to start selling these off one by one, it could turn into a weird stretch of the city.
Right.
But
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Dave Stenkus. I live at 559 Creekside Lane. Right there. So that thing is in my backyard. I have some of the same concerns that others do, mainly privacy as well as safety. I'm not sure with apartments, what kind of people that's going to attract. Whatever it is, I'm going to have it right in my backyard if it's late night parties or whatever the people want to do there. I'd much rather keep it zoned commercial, which is what the place was originally intended to be. I feel it's going to have a negative impact on us as well as property values if they turn that into a commercial zone. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
My name is Vernal Hadley. I am the adjacent owner to the north of this particular property, one that is a part of the Hyde Park subdivision. And of all of the, we that are adjacent to that are the most affected by this change. At the time of purchase, we were told that the that the present zoning would be in effect. And for this reason, we decided to go ahead with our purchase of the property and build a home on it. If there are high-rise blocks or buildings built into this property, it will block the sunlight into our present living and family room. And the occupants would be able to look directly into our living space, which is not a desirable thing. we are interested in the blocking of this change and that it be kept as it is. I have a question, and my question is, has the developer presented a plot plan of this, of his consent for this consideration of this committee at this time? I'm concerned about what he plans to do, especially at the far east end of the property. That is most valuable to us.
Great.
They'll address any questions after the hearing is over for you.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else before we close the public hearing?
May I just say one more thing while I'm here? I think it's been mentioned that there are the properties that are along Main Street. 3 of them, no one lives in. And one of them was rented at the time we lived there. The other 2 have been abandoned before that, and we've been there for years. So it's an area that's getting run down, and I really can't imagine wanting to build a house on Main Street to change that whole strip into a residential area, but that's the
Thank you.
decision of someone else.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing then. Well, over the past, I don't know, year it's been, we've struggled with the issue of removing commercial zone because we in Kaysville feel like we need to have more of it, not less of it, and that's probably one of our major issues in this one. It's a little bit concerning that it seems to be stuck in a limbo where there's residences there, but they're not being used as residences, and I'm not sure why we're not getting commercial uses in there, but that's what you'd hope for, right? To have a commercial zone filled with, I don't know, commercial uses, generating some tax and other retail and business.
Yeah. Wondering, is the developer here?
Yeah, the applicant is here this evening as well.
Or, yeah, hear from the applicant.
Yeah, that would be great.
Sure, if you want to have, should we have the developer speak?
Yeah.
Come forward, thank you.
Sure. My name's Brian Lamano, and I'm the one that's proposing the rezone for that area. First of all, thank the public for coming and talking. The reason why I submit this proposal is because I've done projects like this before, and the idea is it's on an arterial road, and generally there's progress from a multi-level to residential, and then it progresses the other way. It goes from commercial to resident to multi-housing or something like that, and then into single-family residences. This stretch along Main Street, I guess I've had my eye on it for a long time, but it hasn't been developed, and you've got a situation down there where I think a program that if we meet a theme down there that I'd like to stay with, and that's a cottage-like style, which is somewhat old Kaysville-looking style. I think that would look good down there. And as much as there's that stretches along there for commercial, the reason why I believe it hasn't been developed into commercial is because I don't think it's attractive to a lot of commercial development, maybe to a PRU, maybe to a professional building. But I think as I've built in the past, we've built these projects. We're good neighbors. I'd like to submit, or at least show the council or planning commission some of the designs. Is that okay?
Sure.
We've done townhouses that are really attractive. Your cottage style down in Kaysville is similar to these. I think a thing like that would look well in your development. One of the things I'd like to also talk about is creating affordable housing in Kaysville for even the younger groups. We do that a lot. We have a thing for a covenant of quiet hours anyway, so the people that come into our properties have to sign it. We don't have the loud music and things like that like you find in bigger complexes. This is a community development that we propose for residential living, and we attract usually, our design is to attract, our marketing plan is to attract the young couple that is moving from mom and dad are getting married, or their family, their small family with just single with a baby or something like that. And then we call them like tweeners between that and their own home. And so if you get a good neighbor down there and you make it attractive, because some of those houses are being abandoned down there, okay? And we'd like to propose that if we start this project, that we can move forward with it there and then design it in a manner that if the other properties do come available, we could add on to it and make it an attractive spot for Kaysville City. The condos are down the road down here. They came in, and that's an attractive property. Those are really high, but we don't propose necessarily that high. But depending on what the Planning Commission would want, we were just looking at a 2-story with maybe carports or something, but if you want garage under, we could look at that too. But that development came through. The whole corner along that street is residential. We strongly believe that that's residential. That just went brand new housing. And there are RM zones all around in that area. So I really believe that this is a compatible area for what we're looking for. And I believe it creates a good buffer, and I believe it creates a good affordable housing for our young people in Kaysville City. We would be willing to make sure that, of course, there's a site plan approved and that the design option with the Planning Commission is attractive to you guys so that you're not just putting in a box, down there. We don't build boxes anyway, but, you're putting in attractive looking design that would make it a really a cute community. Our communities that we have, they have parties. They're parties when I'm talking about ice cream parties, okay? They're things where they come together and they have nice ice cream parties, they have little barbecues. We try to make it a community living down there and not necessarily an apartment complex. We don't strive for that design. So this would be more affordable housing, younger couples, and designed for a community development as opposed to a 3-story apartment complex down there. We're not looking at that.
I have a question for you. So how many units are you thinking about putting in this area? On this lot?
Oh, on that lot, you can, I think I did the math. It was like 9.8 or something like that, 9.9 units. So there'd be 10 on that unit, on that complex.
And would they be to rent or to sell?
To rent.
To rent. Okay, they'd be rental units.
We rent, yeah. We portfolio lease and we rent them. We have tight controls on our stuff. We have strong controls when we lease. And we have, we have extensive leasing procedures that we go through before we lease. Okay. And so this isn't a situation where you create a box like some places I've seen, not necessarily in Kaysville, but in other parts, and they're just stacked up 4-plex boxes. These are going to be community living design. And we'd be happy to submit that to the Planning Commission. The renderings weren't ready tonight, but I can bring renderings at a later date and give it to you if you'd propose. If it is possible, we would probably look at the rest of those properties along that line and see what could happen. Something really needs to be done down there because that house is abandoned, like the individual said. And obviously the house would be demolished and we would start with a fresh look for Kaysville City along that line. As far as commercial goes, I can't speak to that, but I do know that it's not attractive. Certainly not going to put a McDonald's down there, and I'm certainly not going to put a Burger King down there. And the only thing I could think of maybe is dental buildings that might go in that area. But they're not, those dental properties most likely won't pay a premium price for commercial. They'll go somewhere else. My history is, when we do PR, professional buildings, we look for a corner somewhere, put a dental building in or something like that, and make it look like the community around, so that it's that it blends in with the properties around there. So our proposal is to do a cottage style down there, something similar to what you see in those designs, and bring in a community that we think would be nice for Kaysville City. Thank you.
I've got a couple questions with it. You're looking at about 10 units in there. Then you talk about community living, the gathering place, things like that. Where would you do green space?
For what?
Where would you have green space? Where would you have a gathering area? That would pretty much, as narrow and as this lot is. And
correct. We'd have to look at I didn't want to put a lot of money into a site plan until, I didn't want to do that until I had some kind of an idea if this would be even favorable to the Kaysville City. But our proposal would be, I know that the houses along there, they're either being abandoned or they're going to be turned into maybe a rental area. I mean, if I don't know if they can get the approval. I don't know. We'd like to talk to those individuals and just see if we could do a community cottage, create playground areas, create barbecue areas, create green space, create even recreational walkways around the properties, and create a community like we usually do. That's what we do for our business, is those kind of developments. So.
And I've got a couple more follow-up with that. With these cottage-style homes that you've shown to us, what would the average square footage be?
You're about 1,000 to 1,100 square feet, 2-bedroom, 2-bath.
And they're two level?
Yeah, there'd be a minimum of 2 levels. 'Cause it's the only way you can make them work.
Okay.
And down there, so.
Then you've talked about other developments you've done. What other developments have you done?
We've done one in Layton. It's Bristol Bay Apartments. They're sitting there right by McDonald's. And we bought the house in the middle. We built San Francisco style apartments around it. And Layton City used it for a prototype for a long, long time because it was a nice looking, attractive design. In fact, if you go around Layton City, everybody copied our buildings because we brought in attractive design, curb appeal design. And I think those cottage-looking style would look really good down there. This house right here, I think it's this one right here. If you look at that house, it's a cottage-style house. And we intend to keep that house. If we're successful in the bids on those properties, we would keep that house intact, and because it's already a nice-looking cottage design, and build around it, just like we did in Layton City. And we kept that theme. We kept it all around there, and it looks real nice. So.
Have you had any conversations with any of the neighbors then?
I have.
Rounder? How's that been?
Positive.
Okay. All right.
So, I mean, the argument is saying, well, why not do the whole, I mean, the individual that came up and said, well, why not do the whole property of that? I can't rely on what they do or what the next person does on those other lots, but we would certainly bring in a nice style down there, figure out how we can make the green space work, whatever we had to do.
There's 5 homes along Main Street there. Are all 5 owned by separate individuals?
Yes.
So 5 different groups
Yes.
that you're dealing with?
Right. However, I do know the individuals. The realtor that I work with knows them well. We've already gotten into discussions with them. And it would be nice, I can't promise to acquire those properties, but it would be nice to acquire those properties because then we would build a bigger community down there if we could. But right now, all we have is the one piece of property.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll call you up if we have more questions. Appreciate it. Sure, just be quick, please.
Okay, I have already talked to an individual. If this property stays commercial, they're interested in buying it and tearing down the house that's there. The main reason they're interested if it stays commercial, because my lot and that lot could be one big lot. See what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if that goes residential, then it shrinks everything down.
Right.
It's a lot more susceptible to going commercial if they have the full piece.
Right.
That's one of the reasons I'm involved in this too. I want to see it stay commercial.
Right. Thank you.
And there's only one abandoned house on that street, and that's the one next to us. The one next to that one's being refurbished now as a rental. And all the others are lived in.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
There's already rentals down there.
No. Okay. All right. Well, let's see. We closed the public hearing already, right? So we'll just leave it to the commission discussion.
You know, we do need affordable housing options. However, we also need general commercial. So, I don't know, that's tough. Because it's hard to predict what everyone else will do on that street, so.
As I look at this, both general commercial and residential multifamily, our general plan does state, along major roads, and this would qualify for that. However, the concern I have with this particular zoning and with the PRUD is it creates an island of its own right in there. And when I look at the conformity and how it fits with the surrounding neighborhood, when you look at the requirements within the general plan, I don't feel it fits personally. It's narrow, it's deep, and it does landlock basically some of the potential for commercial development, and I do think we need commercial development. If it were coming in as, hey, we're going to take out a big plot, we're going to combine half of these homes together, and we've already arranged it, might be a little different. You could create a different type of feel, different type of community, but I think putting that an island of its own right in there, to me, I think it takes away from the potential and ability for viable commercial development in the future, which we do need. So as I look at it, my own feeling looking at the general plan is it meets the requirement of a main street, but I don't think it conforms to the surrounding neighborhood, and I don't think it's the best use based on the general plan.
I have a question. If I was able to acquire access to adjoining properties so we could bring in a community, is that something you'd be interested in?
Well, it's interesting. If you had that lot to the south, their lot, Hadley's lot, not Hadley's, I've forgotten your name. Yeah. Then at least you'd be residential next to residential, and you wouldn't be disrupting the commercial aspect of it. So that would solve, I think, a little bit of the concern, but I'm not sure it gets us there.
I think you wouldn't be shoehorning it in either, is my feeling. I think you could create a more viable development in there that really gives more of a community. You don't know what's happening on either side. You said that, and so you've got what you've got. So your development has to be fit to that space, which I think creates, as narrow as that property is, I think personally, I don't think it conforms. If you're able to broaden that, you could probably make it conform and make it fit some of the surrounding area. And then if the property to the north, that still has viability for commercial as well. The way it sits right now and the way it's presented right now, Yeah, my feeling, again, this is my opinion based on what's before us and conformity to the general plan. I don't think it conforms.
You know, I'll speak to it a little bit. My first reaction is I'm very hesitant to give up any commercial space. We've run into this a number of times, but to speak to your comment of what if I got these others and they had a bigger project, I'll go back to our general plan. Under housing, section B, it says some 3 to 6 unit structures dispersed throughout the city. And Mr. Lamano, to your own comment, you said, look all around there. There's residential multifamily zoned all over that map. That is the antithesis of dispersed throughout the city. This is all concentrated in one area. You spoke of the need of affordability. We have a serious need of affordability in Kaysville, but not in this area. The residential multifamily that you see to the north, RM, Francis Peak Apartments, 120 units of Section 8 project-based Section 8 housing, right below the HC. That's St. Mark's Apartments, 72 units of project-based Section 8 housing. The RM right in the middle of the commercial, Jerry Burnett Apartments, 43 units of project-based Section 8 housing. We don't have a need for affordable housing in this area. We have plenty of it. We need it dispersed throughout the city. So on 2 counts, I'm struggling to make a positive recommendation on this. One, we'd be giving up commercial in an ideal location, right along Main Street, one of our more major, if not the most major thoroughfare that we have through the city. And second, we're further concentrating our multifamily in this area. It was about 3 years ago, we had a developer on Mutton Hollow. It's the little niche just to the north of the RM there, it's R2. He came to us with a proposal for 12 condos, and we denied it. He came back with 4. We approved him for 4 condos. He came back a year later and said, I can't make it work for that, I need the other 8. And we turned him down. I don't know if anyone else remembers that particular one. It stands out for me a little bit, but I struggle a little bit with the continued concentration in one area. Again, based on your own comments, anyone can look at the map and go, well, we've already got it there, why don't we just put more there? It's not a good plan to put it all in one place. Like our general plan says, it should be dispersed throughout the city. Lyle, I do have a question for you. At the entry to Hyde Park there on Hyde Park Lane, I believe that that development owns both sides of the entryway there, that's zoned commercial?
Yeah, let me get into the map. So
that zoning didn't change when they bought that?
The cottages at Hyde Park Homeowners Association, I believe, owns the south side of the street, and they've got a sign up there that kind of welcomes into their community.
Right.
The north side is not. It is held separately and privately owned, and it is one that the Planning Commission actually looked at maybe a year or 2 ago, considering a rezone on that property as well. But it is separate from the cottages at Hyde Park subdivision.
Thank you.
You know, I don't disagree with what you're saying, Tom, and I actually think I maybe am leaning that way too. My concern is, you know, kind of stepping back in the planner position. What can we do there that's going to work? And why, you know, hasn't it worked? I mean, if that's commercial, how are we going to get commercial in there instead of have it be kind of, you know, it's zoned commercial, but it's either abandoned or rented or, you know, kind of a low scale residential experience. That's the question I have, and I don't know that there's an answer, and I don't know that we are the ones that can answer that, but that's a concern I have.
Market driven.
Yeah.
I mean, my thought on that is we're looking at a painting that's not finished when we make, you know, that comment, because this will could you back to the zoning map, Lyle? Yes. You know, this will eventually get developed. May not be for a while, who knows, but at some point that's going to get developed. And so is that, and so is all of this. And I think eventually the character of this neighborhood or of this area will change once those are built out. And so I agree with you, it's not ideal right here, right now, what's going on. But in however long it takes for this, as we've planned, for it to get built out, then the marketability of these as general commercial changes and I think improves. But I see your point that it's a tough situation right now.
And to me, it's just it's kind of an island. It's one of the major. But you're right. It's a picture that's not painted yet, and it's kind of like we started right in the middle almost, and we don't know what's going around it.
Yeah, because in addition, I guess, to sort of agree with the current state, you know, there's commercial sort of retail office-y things right here that have been there for 20 years or more, and they're notoriously underleased, or however you want to characterize it. And so it's like, well, we've been waiting for 20 years, why hasn't something happened? And that's a fair point, but I would still say it's because this is a big piece that will eventually develop, and so is same over here and that lot. So on one hand, that's weighing in favor of it to me. On the other hand, I don't think I've made any bones about the fact that I am in favor of multifamily, generally speaking, and affordable housing, generally speaking. And to me, it wouldn't even matter that necessarily our concentration of density is quite high relative to the rest of Kaysville over in this area. But and another piece to add on to that, it does make sense because there's RM here, there's RM here, there's RM here. It would fit with the character of the current zoning from that standpoint. But again, on balance, I think the future of this, if we have our planner hats on, is better used as commercial, in my opinion.
One of the comments that was made in our packet from the staff was to talk with the developer, give them recommendations. I'm with you. I've advocated for some of the multifamily that's been proposed the last several months, well, actually several years, because we do have a need for it. We need diversity. We do need more of that here in Kaysville City, not necessarily right in that spot, but I guess there's a couple options. One is we are just a recommending body. Whatever recommendation we make, whether it's to deny or approve, it goes to the city council. If you don't like the decision that's made, you can always appeal to the city council, or you can withdraw it, or we could table it. You could go back to the owners and see if you could negotiate purchase agreements for other property that might change the character of it. To me, it's just that single strip or island to me just does not work in this area. But those are some of the, I guess, options that, if we proceed forward, I don't know how the vote would go, but you could take that chance. But once it's been voted and moved forward with the recommendation, then it goes to the city council, whatever decision that they make from the legislative side, then you can't bring it back for at least a year, I believe is what it is. Is that correct?
That's accurate. Yes.
Yeah. So from your perspective, those are some things to consider, but I'll tell you right now, my vote, I think, would be not in favor of it as it currently stands.
I guess I'll say one thing, although to be honest, it doesn't entirely sway me. I think this would be fantastic. I would love something like this type of product. This is, I think, would attract a great crowd, if you will, even though that's not really a concern of mine either way, as I've said before. But I think this would be a really good product, and it would work somewhere in Kaysville, but just in my opinion, it wouldn't work here. And for me personally, it wouldn't sway me that all of this swath was owned and being proposed to be rezoned. I would be having the same concern that I don't want to give up this portion because we've planned for it, and if we change the plan now, then what was the point of planning it to begin with? And you know, I could see someone who's watched all of our videos, the two people that do that, say, well, what did you say back, whatever, you know, 2 or 3 months ago or something, in a different context. I'm saying in this place, this is different than maybe something we did elsewhere out in West Kaysville. In fact, I could say right there at the intersection of Angel and 200 North, I think I was saying let's not give up commercial as well, because there are certain areas where it works better. There are certain areas where multifamily works better and not commercial, and so everyone's different. I think here's is better for commercial.
I would be inclined to agree. I think that the project is great, and I would love to see it somewhere else in Kaysville, in a different area. I think that this area has been set aside as general commercial. I vote to preserve that as much as possible because that's what we need. But we also need, you know, affordable housing options and diversity. And so I would love to see the project presented in another area. And I do believe that we should keep this area as general commercial, especially since, you know, once things start changing a little bit and as time progresses, that area could become really vibrant as a commercial hub for Kaysville. And I think that that's kind of the direction that the city hopes to see. Eventually, that's part of our plan, and it does landlock the other property, and I don't think that's in the best interest of the area. So I would be inclined to vote not in favor of it at this time, if it goes to vote.
Lyle, could you possibly put up a Kaysville City zoning so we can kind of get an overview of general commercial throughout the city rather than just in the one area? Maybe just for some perspective for folks that are here, what we're talking about, that we are limited, that there's just not a lot of it left. If you look out there on the very west end of 2nd North, there's a little tiny bit of general commercial. The general commercial on the very furthest west end of the map is gone. That's part of the West Davis corridor, so we've lost that. We have some general commercial just south of Boondocks. And that's it.
I lament what we lost right there again. But and there is still one little spot right there, I think, for a gas station.
Yes.
And I mean, so I'll just make the same point. Here's why I lamented it, and I know this is a dead horse and it's water on the bridge, whatever you want to say. The West Davis corridor didn't come in. We didn't know what this potential was here until this developed. We stopped the painting midstream. Over here, the painting's still being painted. Let's not stop it again.
Thank you.
All right, are we ready for a motion?
I'll go ahead and give a shot at it. I make a motion that we recommend denial for the rezone of 0.65 acres of property at 500 North Main Street from GC General Commercial to the RM Residential Multifamily Zoning District to include the PRUD overlay zone for Brian Lamano and Robert and Julie Durden.
I'll second.
I think it's Betty.
I think you're first.
Oh, aye.
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 Okay, next is the request to, I guess, is that a rezone 4.7 acres of property at approximately 1325 West, 200 North from RA, residential agricultural, to general commercial for the Ogden Clinic.
Okay. I'll give a brief update to this item. This is a tabled item where the Planning Commission has previously, back in April, held the public hearing on this. The property, just as a reminder, is directly across the street from the Smith's Marketplace, near Flint Street and 200 North to the south. And since the last meeting with the Planning Commission, public hearing was held, and the Planning Commission asked the applicant to meet with some of the neighbors to hear and address some of their concerns. So to that, a development agreement has been put together and proposed by the applicant that addresses some of those items, and I'll let them speak maybe a little more detail regarding that. Items such as lighting, fencing, water issues, landscaping for privacy and such are included within that. Some of the other items that came up that I'll maybe speak to just a little bit more directly regarding the proposal dealt with traffic. So since the last meeting, I guess I have the mouse that I'll use, reached out to our engineering firm, JUB, that does some of our traffic engineering and counts in the area, looking at two primary concerns with it. So as far as the capacity issue within the roads themselves, there seems to be ample capacity for additional development along 200 North, even as currently striped. However, the intersection performance and level of service was an item that had been brought up of concern there at Angel Street and 200 North. And so we have a study that shows that there currently are some issues without the development at that. And a lot of that has to do with the signal timing. So we've, with that report and that information, we'll be looking to go forward and check with them and some signal experts on optimizing that. Just to show some of the details with it. So here at, again, what they kind of do, and I'm not the traffic engineer, but you'll get my version of what the study is they take the peak hour traffic, so 5 o'clock rush hour type traffic. They measure a number of cars during certain intervals, typically 15-minute periods for an hour, and they look at the different movements. So many of the movements are functioning fine. You see a lot of A's and B's. There's some C's which are acceptable, but you do see some turn movements that are showing problems. And the recommendation simply states that with some optimization of that signal, working on some of the timing, you can bring those levels up so that everything would be a passing level. The comments and the discussion with that firm that's helped with this pretty much stated that with or without the additional development, these changes would hold consistent. So based on the amount of anticipated traffic that would come from a proposed facility, these sea level grade increases that are shown here, they believe would be possible even with the additional traffic. Let me revert back to the map. So the applicant, as part of the development agreement, again, as you've seen before, has provided some example architecture from some of their other facilities they have throughout the region. They've pulled back a little bit from some of the details on a very specific site plan as they continue to understand what specialties and what size needs and space needs and details will work for them on the site. But what we've looked at, again, from a traffic perspective, as staff and again with our engineers, that will, again, should this go forward with the rezone, would be where those access points would be at. Ideally for us, we would like to see probably 2 points of access into the property. One, which is the preferred, would be across the street from the access which goes in between Neaters and the America First Credit Union. But another probably would be towards the west end of the property. And so then we've heard concerns from the neighbors and through this process of the visibility of the trail, the DNRG, and that crossing. And so we're looking into as staff, and some of these are existing problems and could work with the applicant on their development should it move forward to how to improve that. Red flashers instead of yellow on the signal. Additional posts that might mount and face drive approaches so that people coming out of Smith's, similarly probably at the Ogden Clinic site, people would know when somebody's hoping to cross that trail. So a lot of those details, frankly, to be explored. So those are just some ideas that have come up as we've heard some issues and concerns on, again, probably pre-existing conditions that could be exacerbated some based on the additional business and traffic that would come into this site. Ultimately, again, after having met with the development agreement put into place, we're looking for, from the Planning Commission, a recommendation. I do see the applicant and their team here this evening to provide additional details and answer additional questions. The public hearing has been held for this item. However, should the Planning Commission desire any additional comments, that would be your prerogative to choose what else you would like to hear from the public, if any, regarding the site and concern. I myself am happy to answer any questions as I can, and will return the floor to the Planning Commission.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Well, as was stated, this was tabled, so we can pick up our discussion where we left off. It probably makes sense to have some additional input. I don't know if there are public that wants to make a few comments. We'll do that. And then I think we should probably have the applicant come up and help us with our discussion. So we're going to limit, this is not a formal or official public hearing, but if you'll just limit your comments to a few minutes, you come forward and state your name and we'll be happy to hear from you.
Okay, my name is Benson Black. I specifically would like to address the concerns you've heard a lot already about traffic safety, in particular the issue with the trail. It's right there. I will offer, not that this makes a hill of beans worth of difference, but I actually am a civil engineer and I have some familiarity with considerations that go into the design of intersections and stuff like that. Okay. Now, I'm going to pick a little bit at the traffic information you've already been offered. When you're trying to figure out what is a safe intersection, what's a safe design, a big part of it is not just traffic counts and knowing how much traffic there is on a given street. That's not the whole story. The big issue is flow. How many people are turning left? How many people are turning right? How many people want to make a U-turn? Because it really affects the way everything works. There's been some, it's pointed out, there's been some problems already that probably don't change very much whether this clinic goes in or not, whether this is rezoned commercial or not. But here's the perspective that I'd like to offer. I have put some thought into this. I think I'm kind of close to correct. You can judge for yourself whether I'm smoking something or not. But the bottom line is, you think about why this particular location is attractive to someone wanting to put in a commercial venture. I think the answer to that, most would agree, is visibility. You're on a main street. You got a lot of people coming down the street in the morning, heading from West Kaysville. In fact, the part of West Kaysville that is west of Smith's. If you go look at the traffic there, it is significant. A lot of people coming from west to east in the morning to go get on the interstate. A lot of people going the other direction in the afternoon to go home. The attractiveness to that location, to a commercial venture, is visibility. I think that's it. I think you're going to get an awful lot of free advertising, if you want to think of it that way, because a lot of people drive by there, see it every day, and when Junior is sick and needs to go to a clinic, oh yeah, there's that place, that new place, right there on the right. It's just across from Smith's. So where this goes, if you're thinking kind of as a traffic engineer and you're anticipating the flow of traffic, where is their market going to come from? Not all of it, but maybe a bigger share of it is going to be people who live out in West Kaysville, west of Smith, and have seen this location going to and from work. So Junior's sick and I need to take him to the clinic. You get in the car, you drive down, you turn into the clinic, no problem. You turn right into the clinic. Doesn't really matter how much traffic there is. It's an easy entrance. The appointment's over. What direction do you want to go after the appointment? Well, okay, if you're going to work, you'd go to the right and you go out to the interstate. If you're going home, there's a fair chance that you want to come out of that property and turn left and go back down towards where your house is. So none of what I'm saying is scientific. None of what I'm saying is really the prerogative of a civil engineer. This is common sense. I think you can all recognize that at least a fair percentage, I don't know, half, maybe more than half, of folks coming out of that clinic are going to want to turn left across 200 North. Neither does it take a civil engineer to recognize that a left turn out of that parking lot is more dangerous than a right-hand turn. You got to look at the traffic to the left, you got to look at the traffic to the right, you got to watch for someone coming out of the Rouse Market across the way or out of the Neater's lot. And as you make that turn, watching for all of these, you got to also be careful. Oh yeah, there's the trail there. Watch out for the lady with her child in the stroller, right? So my fundamental point here is I think there's a fair chance that a commercial property in that location is going to increase the left-hand turn traffic coming across 200 North. And for a situation which is already pretty dangerous, I think you've heard enough about that already, about that trail crossing, I think it makes it work. Simple as that. Now, I'd just like to contrast that for the sake of thought, for the sake of which is better, commercial or residential. If someone were to build a few houses in there, even if they were to put high-density housing in, I think it's reasonably likely, and I base this based on personal experience every morning coming out of Mountain Vistas, that the majority of those people are going to want to turn right. They're going to want to go to the freeway, go to work, and then when they come home, they want to turn left across 200 North to get back into the property. What I think is probably true is an acceleration lane to help you turn right takes care of the morning problem. A left turn pocket in the afternoon takes care of the left turn onto the property. First of all, it's fewer people, but what is happening in the afternoon hours is there's less west to east traffic, so it's easier to make that left turn. So my fundamental argument here is I think in terms of the safety of the trail and the general likelihood of accidents in the sort, there is some advantage to leaving it residential over changing it to commercial. Now, how could you mitigate this? Well, first thing you think of is, okay, maybe I need to put up a right turn only coming out of the clinic, and or put in a raised median that prevents people from turning left. I would recommend both of those things if you do decide to change the zoning. The slight problem with that is those people still want to turn left. They still want to go west on 200 North. So immediately coming out of the parking lot, they try to get over into the left turn lane so they can make a U-turn at Flint, which might create more and different problems. And I would offer that despite the conclusion that's been sort of drawn by the traffic firm you've engaged, I think that would make a difference in how that light functions at Flint. One further comment is maybe you think, well, maybe we could solve this with another traffic light at where the exit from Ogden Clinic comes on to 200 North. I don't think that works. It's just too close to the other light. And one last comment along that front. There is, I think most of you probably already know, a thought of putting some additional housing directly across from Mountain Vistas. That Mountain Vistas entrance onto 200 North, once those additional properties are going to put in with a matching road trying to come onto the, they're never going to get onto 200 North unless you put a signal at Mountain Vistas. So I think you wind up not too far down the road, potentially, traffic signal at Mountain Vistas, another one at Flint. There's no room to put another one in the center. They're just too close together. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Question, Lyle. Was the traffic report sent to the public?
It was just included within the packet that's available to the public. So yes, it's part of what's posted online.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
I will be short. So,
Your name?
Nicole Steed. I am on my property touches the corner of the south end of the property. Anyway, I'm here more personally, not for traffic. It's just because it touches my property on that south end. I'm mostly concerned about that. So in the development plan, there were just a couple things that I guess I feel like should be in there, a little bit more specific. First of all, the fencing, they say 6 feet, and I think it should be 8 feet. I think going from commercial to residential, I think it's pretty important to have that extra 2 feet minimum. My next thing would be the landscaping. They said along that south end, trees every 25 feet, just one row of trees. So their plan is kind of the parking lot goes back there. I don't see, I guess, a reason, especially as they talk about like they want to be really good neighbors and transition in really well. I don't think it would be too much to ask that it would be at least 2 rows of trees and closer than 25 feet. They could be staggered or something. I just think that that's about as minimum as you could put in your development plan at single row 25 feet apart. And then the other thing that I would like to see in the development plan, especially, if those things are left that kind of vague and kind of as little as possible, would be that if Ogden Clinic doesn't go ahead and build on that property, I get that once it's built, you can't specify selling and zoning at that point, but that if Ogden Clinic gets in there, if they purchase the property and if they get in there and they decide they are unable to build, that property goes back to the zoning of residential agriculture, then it can come back to the city and the residents can have, some input again. I guess I just fear, what if they get in and they realize budget-wise they can't do it? And they said that's never happened. They have full plans on building. But if it didn't, it would just be too bad then if they could just go sell it commercially and just have the development plan as the only thing that the new developer would possibly have to live up to. One reason that it seems okay to come all the way to have that coming next to that residential area is because it is parking lot. If they ended up not building on it and it went to a different commercial developer, who knows what could come all the way back on that south end of that property. So those would just be my 3 things I would really like to see in the development plan.
Great, thank you.
My name is Neil Van Leeuwen. I live in the Mountain Vistas neighborhood. First of all, I appreciate all you're doing. It's eye-opening to come to one of these meetings and actually see a map of the city and see where all the zoning is and what's available. And I appreciate the job that you do. It's hard. You have to make hard decisions. I'm wondering if the ultimate plan of the Planning Commission, if we're so starved for commercial space, is to zone in the entire Second North commercial. It seems to me like when you're talking about, we lost this and we lost this commercial, and then what is the purpose of having all this commercial property? Is it to generate revenue for the city? Or is it to provide services for the members of the city and all that you deal with? in looking in our discussions tonight, I thought, well, there are a lot of nice commercial properties that Ogden Clinic could build on along Main Street. You saw those big lots there that are already commercial in red in Kaysville City that would be very attractive. My concern is that commercial property really becomes intrusive commercial property into neighborhood property. It really does. I would rather see a high density, something attractive like that go in there. I think that would be safer for the community, and entice Ogden Clinic to go onto the other side of I-15 and build across from and next door to the other medical properties that are already in Kaysville, or down on that Main Street property that's there. And reserve this as being residential, because I think the flavor of the city is better if Second North stays residential and doesn't become commercial. That's my opinion. I appreciate again what you're doing.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Linda Black, and I'm also resident of Mountain Vistas. I was here last time. So thank you actually for giving us a second opportunity to offer insights and the residents' perspective on this controversial project. I'm back to talk about maintaining the residential zoning. As you can see on the property, and as the gentleman right before me mentioned, 3/4 of the property surrounding this property is residential. And as a follow-up, I know we were talking last time, it was brought up that the lot sizes in West Kaysville are set at half-acre lots. If you look at the existing lots on Mountain Vista, as well as, excuse me, as the preserve being built, they're mostly below the half-acre. I believe our lot, which is, on Shadow Breeze, is only 1/3 of an acre. And I'm also going to be handing out some of the signs for the plans for the preserve, which is the new property that's being developed by Symphony Homes. And many of them are below half-acre already, so their precedent's already set there. So a builder really could go into that property, if you can go back to that other picture, and build, if they want to do a little bit higher density, I'd be fine with that. Or even if you did 10 or 12 really nice homes, on 1/3-acre lots, that would keep the area consistent and not have to disrupt it with rezoning. After the last meeting, I actually spoke to the head of the preserve project for Symphony Homes, and he was actually not even aware that the property in question was available for sale. But he would have been interested in talking to the owners about, bidding on the property. So, I just find that a little bit disturbing that, here you have the, Brighton Homes on one side, you have Symphony Homes on the other, and the owners of the property didn't even approach them in order to see about building on the property. But he's familiar with it and would certainly be interested in talking to them. So I know we've already addressed some of the traffic issues. The one thing I did want to mention, because I know, Lyle, you said that the street is actually, would it be able to handle the additional traffic? But if you look now, if you actually drive 200 North and you come over from the bridge, I was looking at the, east side where you have all the commercial properties. It's actually a pretty wide road. You've got the, 2 lanes on either side. You have a deceleration lane. You have a center lane. When you get over the bridge on the other side, it actually begins to narrow. And then when you get to Flint, it actually goes down to the 2 lanes, and it's much narrower at that stage. So, putting that additional amount of traffic there would really make that a lot more congested, more than it already is. Because now if you, excuse me, I want to skip over some of this. So the east side, so there's already creating a bottleneck at Flint, which makes it difficult for residents to commute during peak times. Excuse me. And if you think about a clinic where, you're going to have patients come to see them, if you have working people that are going to go for appointments, they're going to want to set their appointments. Think about it. You work 9 to 5, you're going to want your appointment either early in the morning or you're going to want it late in the afternoon. And so what that's going to do is it's going to actually coincide with the peak traffic hours anyway. So, that's going to be their busiest times as well as 200 North's busiest times. And then I also went through and did a little bit of research. I know you have the traffic data, but, I was in the medical industry for many years, and so, I kind of went through and looked at some data that came through. So for urgent cares, an average daily visits is 32. So you figure 32 people, this is just for the urgent care. So they're going to be 32 people coming in and 32 people leaving. So that's additional 64 traffics in and out for that. Then you think about the office staff. So an office might have, they might have 10 disciplines there. So 10 people, or 10 offices with 3.5 staff members, again, in and out, that's going to be an additional 77 trips back and forth. Then if you think about the patients, so you have, I'm guessing at 10 offices, I don't know how many they're going to have there. So you figure 8-hour days, 20-minute appointments, you're going to have 240 patients, again, in and out 240, out 240. So those numbers right there signify like 600 additional cars on 200 North in that skinnier little area. So you actually have, so that's, it has the vulnerable bike path, the Smith's traffic, which is already increasing because now you already have the new fast food places that have been approved in there, and then you have the bottleneck. So, and so, you know what, and I didn't even include the cleaning crews that have to come in, the hazardous waste that gets to be picked up, the UPS, FedEx that are dropping off meds, doing all that kind of stuff. So none of that was included in my 600 plus number. So, or your other option would be not to rezone, and then you would build the 12 houses or 24 houses, whatever, and then you'd have a set number of cars. And so that would keep it, at a decent growth for the amount of space that we have there. And then the other point I want to make, I'm at the end, who are the already established physicians and clinics in the city? Will you be actually adding to your revenue, or are you going to be taking it away from existing business owners who are already serving the community? So you got to look at that, because one of the things that I, maybe you all aren't people that look at reviews or Yelps or whatever, and take most of them with a grain of salt, but they've already had, Ogden clinics have already had 3 failed clinics in the area. One of them I know is in Bountiful, one of them maybe up in Roy. And their existing clinics that they have, 3 of them, I was surprised, 3 of them have between a 2 and a 3 out of a 5-star rating, where people are complaining about long wait times or staffing, things like that. So, you've got to kind of consider who, I'm sure the doctors are wonderful, but you've got to consider their organization and, are they really running a good clinic, or are we going to get a failed clinic in a few years, and you guys have made the changes to rezone, and now what happens when you have an empty building? You're going to get maybe a few hairdressers or a masseuse come in to this building, and it just doesn't fit within the community. So, I'm done.
Thank you.
Don't
Appreciate
rezone,
it.
please.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Okay.
prejudiced about.
Do you want to state your name for us, just real quick?
Randy Clem.
Thank you.
Okay, and I live right to the east of this property, right back up against it. In my own preference, as long as I have a wall, and I mean a wall, 8 feet minimum around it, I'd rather have a clinic like that than high-density housing. I know I'm going to go against some people here, and I'd rather have that than 12 or 16 other houses back there. Because what's that bring? Okay, you got a lot of kids. I mean, we're a community, a bedroom community, basically for Salt Lake or Ogden or wherever. Our office is in Kaysville, but how many other people drive out of town to go to work? Okay, so in one respect, yes, I'd like it to have housing, but in a situation like this, I'd rather have that than high-density housing behind my house. Snooping in my barn, worrying about the horses and stuff like that. Because it happens. It happened with the Kaysville Bible Church. And if you rezone this, before you do, you make sure there's specifications that there will be a wall, no matter who buys it, if they can't keep it or whatever, that no matter what happens, the wall's going to be put in. Okay? That's my that's my 2 cents.
I have a question. I actually have a question. Did you say you're one of those properties right there?
Yes, I am.
You're that one.
I'm right next to the Kaysville Bible Church.
Okay.
Gibbs and Catherine Smith now is right next to me. Okay? And so we've talked about that. If we're doing anything there, we want that wall in there. And that would go down and go across the south end also.
Have you had people approach you to buy?
Of course.
And your answer is no. Is that right?
I'm told to start over.
Right.
Okay?
So for the foreseeable future, that ain't changing. Is that what you're saying?
Until he passes away.
Well,
and then his children want some money. That'll happen.
Well, that's what happened with Smiths, or with Greens.
That's right.
Because I tried to buy Greens for years.
And who is anyone here that lives there?
Catherine's?
If you know your neighbors, what's the word on the street for the plan for that one? They're planning on staying there for the net foreseeable future?
Yes. Yes.
My name is Amy Jarman, and I live in Mountain Vistas also. And honestly, I'm not sure. I think there's positives and negatives to everything. My biggest concern is that I'm a mother and I have children. The night that we met with Ogden Clinic up here, there was an accident on that cross stop. And it was a lady in my neighborhood that a car had stopped to let her go across with her kids in the stroller, and the car behind it didn't stop. So thank goodness the first car stopped, or else the second car could have possibly hit her and her children. Instead, it rammed into the car that had stopped. We have 192 houses in our neighborhood. That is without the preserve from Symphony that is going to go out of our entrance too. Yes, we do have the Angel exit. Hardly anyone uses it. Almost our whole neighborhood goes out of 200 North. Whether or not there ends up having the high-density housing on the green property across the street, that would be more traffic coming out again. You have Smith's traffic coming out, and then you're adding more traffic from Ogden Clinic. You have now hit all 4 sides of that crosswalk, that you constantly have kids from our neighborhood, from other neighborhoods going across. My concern is adding more traffic to that area. Someone is going to get killed. My brother, when I was 8 years old, got hit by a car in a crosswalk. Luckily, he lived, but it still affects him to this day. Something has to be done as far as the traffic in that area. It is not safe. The cars do not stop. There's too much traffic condensed in that area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jim Reynolds. I live in Mountain Vistas. My sentiments echo most of the people who have spoken today. but I was wondering if I could illustrate one further point in a little bit more detail. Would it be possible to zoom in on that crosswalk?
Is that sufficient?
Can you zoom in even more?
Let me switch a map.
I don't know if any of you live in West Kaysville, but here's the entrance to Smith's. People pull in and they park in this center lane to turn left into this Smith's. Almost always during the daytime, there are people parked here and here and here and here. They park right on the crosswalk. Unfortunately, that does not stop people from trying to use the crosswalk. I have seen multiple times with my own eyes near fatalities on this crosswalk because people park here and the people that are coming up the road don't see the people in the crosswalk.
When you say park, you mean they're using that as a turning lane? Yeah.
They're trying to turn left into Smith's. And the more development that happens in West Kaysville, the bigger problem this becomes. The cars that are traveling east on the road don't stop when people are parked there. And I have seen multiple times when people have walked out in front of cars that are waiting to turn left and almost been killed by cars. If we build another driveway right here with cars turning this way, this crosswalk is already a disaster. I think personally, and I think most of my neighbors would agree, something needs to be done about this now already. If we add 600 or 700 additional cars coming in and out right here, I agree with Mrs. Jarman, someone is going to get killed there. I've already witnessed near fatalities there multiple times with my own eyes. My only other concern is if that becomes a commercial property, usually with commercial properties there's big lights that go in. Oftentimes those lights are left on 24 hours a day, or at least when it's dark. That will undoubtedly devalue the properties that are adjacent to that lot. There's 14 homes immediately adjacent in Mountain Vistas, plus the Clems and the Gibbs on the other side. Nobody's ever going to want to buy those homes with lights illuminating their backyards all night long. But my main point was the traffic problem. It's already a major problem, and I think something needs to be done about it now, and making it twice as bad is not the answer, and that clinic will absolutely make it worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you've far exceeded your time the first time around, so short comment, please.
Really, really short. Lyle, can you zoom in one more time? Kaysville Bible Church, right here. They have an exit here for people to turn left. If you drive by there, it's chained off all the time. My point is, left-hand turns, dangerous.
Thank you.
Just to reiterate.
Okay, we're going to close our semi-public hearing and open it up to discussion amongst the commission.
Lyle, I had a question for you. The comment was asked, is it feasible, say if Ogden Clinic does do this and they don't develop, can it go back to residential? Would that be a stipulation?
Yeah, it could be. So I believe the way the development agreement is currently written, it is not set up to do that. However, should that be the request and direction, we could add language in there in some fashion. I can't give you the exact verbiage off the top of my head, but a time limit per performance. If it doesn't happen, it can revert back to the pre-existing zone, or other mechanisms that we could work with on them to put together if that's desirable.
Thank you.
Do we want to hear from the applicant?
That's what I was just
in
going to say.
response?
If you're ready, we'll have the Ogden Clinic come up. Kevin, do you want to send someone up from your team? maybe address some of these concerns and tell us how you feel what do we call that? The meeting you had went and what you learned from that.
Good evening. Kevin Porter with Ogden Clinic. I think, as we sit here and listen, understand the concerns, and are happy to work with the city and what we need to do to create, all right? I mean, clearly for us, we want our patients to be safe. We want our employees to be safe. If there's an issue that exists there, we want to work to make sure that that's safe. I'm sure the city does as well. From the standpoint of what we're trying to develop, the meeting, I think, went well with the residents. I think we heard loud and clear, as Lyle explained, what their concerns were, and we're willing to address those concerns, as we did for the most part in the development agreement. The wall that they've talked about, right, a fence, if you will, block fence, that's not a problem. That's something that we're used to doing when we built around residential areas. It defines, I don't recall exactly how it defines in the development agreement, but that's something that we're willing to work through. And as we looked at all of the properties and decided on this particular property, a lot of it has to do with look and feel, it has to do with proximity to where we think patients are coming from, to the hospital that was built, and frankly, we think it's a great location for us. So recognizing this, it says this in the development agreement, I think it should be understood. If this is approved and we purchase the property, we're not turning and burning immediately, right? This is something that's in our strategic plan that, as we put in the development agreement, would be developed a few years out. And I think it's important to understand there's probably opportunity for us all to work on whatever we need to work on that corridor. But we think we'll be good neighbors. We're committed, as we talked with the residents about what we plan to do to work through that. We pulled back on the site plan a little bit simply because we heard some concerns about the height of the building, about the shape of the building, where it's going to be placed, recognizing that we need to figure out where is best to put the entrance and exit points of the property, and that's something that we're willing and able to work with the city in making sure that it's located, placed in a proper location. And that's part of the reason why we didn't want to tie the site plan that was kind of presented as an example last time into the development agreement. It needed to be, we felt, based on our discussion, a little bit more fluid. So that's, I guess, my report back to you.
Could you address kind of the operations? One of the ladies talked about how many disciplines you might have and how many employees. How are you anticipating staffing this, and how many offices would you have, and what is your anticipated flow in there?
Yeah, so when we initially proposed it, we proposed it somewhere between 30 to 45,000 square feet. Inside that, there's a variety. I mean, right now we've got a certain discipline of providers. There's about 4 to 5 providers that we're looking for a home for as leases expire, and that's what's kind of driven our expansion, our growth into that. In a site, and I'm going to answer a little bit vaguely because we haven't defined completely everything at this particular point in time. But if you look at our site, like up at Harrison, it's a professional center north. It's Harrison there, close to the D-Event Center. That's the building that you kind of see renderings of. There we have 19 physicians, roughly about 50 staff members that work in that building. That's the numbers, the traffic study numbers that you've seen in the reports. That's where we've taken those numbers from, is that kind of like-size building. And so we're going to have a variety of things. We do anticipate there'll be an urgent care. The urgent care typically operate 8 to 8, 6 days a week, excuse me. Most of them are closed on Sunday. So again, but hasn't been defined, and that's something that we're working through to develop a little bit more firmly as we get closer to development.
All right, thank you. She also mentioned that maybe you might want to address this, that a couple of them you've closed or they failed.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what she's talking about there. If you look at our patient ratings, yes, we have negative patient comments. I think every physician does. Overall, we track patient satisfaction. It's very, very important to us. We believe, being a partner in the community, if you look at the community events, we work to sponsor programs in those communities. That's key and important to us. If you look at our mission statement of who we are, to be the clinic of choice, right? We start with patients, employees, and providers, right? There's a lot of things that you have to do to make that happen. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. But we've grown. If you look at our growth and our opportunity over the years, I started with the organization 15 years ago. We had 3 locations at that particular time. We had 56 providers. Today, we're at 150 providers, and we have 18 locations. Our Grandview location, we started with a lease, and we started to really build things in that particular environment. We closed it. We built a property a little bit further west to serve the residents in that community. We look very strategically about where we want to be, and we use market data to understand where patients are currently coming from, and we're trying to be more convenient for them. So as we look at this, I would love to hear specifics about thoughts on that, right? There's perception out there, but we move physicians around as leases expire to fit within where their market flow is coming from a patient perspective. Our main hub where we're up there on Harrison Boulevard in Ogden. We've expanded down into Davis County, into Layton and into Bountiful as we've grown with primary care and additional specialties. And our hope, again, is to create partnerships and be a resource and be a viable organization and entity within the communities that we serve.
Thank you.
What would you be looking at for your construction timetable? You thinking if this got approved, you'd break ground before the end of the year, next year, 2 years? What are you looking at?
Yeah, so if just to answer that question a little bit more broadly, our strategic plan right now, we're building a clinic in West Point. It's an in-between 2 of our clinics to kind of serve that community. That is anticipated to finish and complete in March of 2020. We've got a location on 12th Street in Ogden that needs to be renovated, updated, and we anticipate that will start somewhere in the time frame that West Point finishes. We're working with the physicians in that area currently to define that location and where they're at, and it would start after that project. So if I look at that, I'm probably looking at breaking ground somewhere in the end of 2020 or 2021, somewhere in that realm.
Okay, thank you.
Lyle, I have a question for you, actually. Can you bring up the map that shows, the whole thing? Can you zoom in? I just wanted to see, so that's the Kaysville Bible Church right there, right? Next to the property?
Correct.
Okay. So they're building, so on Second North, is that green, is that grass?
Yes, right up here is a pocket of grass, parking lot, and their building is kind of tucked in the southwest corner of their property.
Okay. I was just wondering if it's possible to share that road space or parking space and so that they could exit, just have different options. Is that something that they would have to talk to Kaysville Bible Church about if they left like a roadway or a pathway there to be able to kind of share that?
Sure. Should they be interested in pursuing it and the Bible Church be willing to allow them, that is an access that could be set up.
Okay.
Our ordinances wouldn't prohibit them from having cross-access across one another's properties.
Okay. Okay, I was just curious. Have you had any discussions like
We've
that?
not, no.
Oh, okay. Just because I wondered if that would sort of help with the traffic flow a little bit, if they'd be willing and open to something like that.
It might help with the crosswalk, but it wouldn't help with the intersection.
Yeah, that's
The closer
true.
you get to the intersection, then you start having problems there with conflicting traffic.
Okay.
Go ahead, finish.
There's no doubt that crosswalk is a problem. The way it's configured and the traffic and so on. Something will develop on that property, and so I think we're going to have issues with that crosswalk regardless of what develops there. And I guess the way to address that is to figure out something else to do with the crosswalk. Because I don't know that it's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. I don't know that should be a constraining factor for whatever development would go in there, but it would be something to encourage that some planning get done and something be done to address that crosswalk in the future.
In the staff report, it mentions, I don't know if, I haven't followed, there might be more developed conversations than I'm aware of, but it mentions a flashing red or yellow something signal at the crosswalk, and that's probably inevitable. At least my layman's view is that it's probably something that's needed now, if not now, very soon, something like that.
Yeah, I think, if you had
something.
Yeah, there's that yellow flashing.
Okay, so
there are some
something
different kinds.
more significant than that is there.
You see some of them in Salt Lake where it actually puts a red signal up.
Yeah.
That stays red for a while, and then it flashes red for a period of time, and then.
That exists on the trail at Lake Park.
Right, that's right, it does, yes. And those help, they're better, but they're still somewhat of a problem. The ideal would be to either have an overpass or an underpass, but boy, those are expensive
and I don't see that happening.
Either, really. Yeah.
Because how could I guess the city could mandate that, but I don't know what the mechanism would be right now to do that.
I don't know about mandating it. It would just be something the city would decide to do. That's a city road there, right, Lyle? That's not a state road.
I guess the city could pay for it, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And just make all those improvements, but they would have to get I think they would have to get the consent of UTA, who I think owns that, and I don't know that they would be doing that.
Is that a state road?
Yeah, so 200 North in this area is a city
No, I'm talking the rail trail.
But the rail trail is controlled by UTA.
Yeah, the trail.
And so any work we do within that corridor has to have their consent and approval.
Yeah.
So that's an obstacle.
Yeah.
Well, if this is going to be, we have a question, this is a planning question, right? If this is going to be commercial, then the next question would be, is this proposed use going to be particularly more intense traffic-wise than the standard commercial use would be? And I think that's a good question, but, long-term we see this 200 North, the entire part being, I think it's going to be largely commercial, in part because of the extended, what's it called? Not legacy, but
West
Davis corridor. And so I think we need to figure out whether this is going to be commercial, and if so, is there a use that's going to reduce the traffic or reduce the traffic problems? I don't know that it will. I think this is a problem area that needs to be solved. There's some traffic issues that need to be solved regardless of what happens with the Ogden Clinic or anything else that goes there.
Well, I have a question for you then, Wolf. So you said that something could be, what have you seen done in a situation like this with the crosswalk? They close off those trail entrances and exits, or what else do they do?
Really the only thing you can do with that is either enhance the signaling,
okay,
or do an overpass or an underpass.
Okay, that's really.
And or close the trail, and I don't think that's a good option.
And the signaling and the flashing or what have you is in some respects lipstick on a pig.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The only true solution would be overpass or pass, whatever.
And I don't think the underpass is really feasible there.
Overpass.
Probably an overpass.
Or the overpass. Those would be great. Those would solve the problem completely. But is it really possible?
Yeah.
Could the city, could the city direct that, and how would that work with UTA, and is that even possible? I don't know the answer.
I think the city could, because the street belongs to the city, so they could.
But the trail doesn't.
No, the trail doesn't. But I think
And they would be
I think UTA would be
into
cooperative.
they would be into UTA's property to make those improvements.
Probably so, but I think UTA would give that permission because it would make the trail safer.
Yeah.
So I think they'd be okay with that. The question would be who's going to pay for it?
Mm-hmm.
And in all likelihood, UTA would say, well, we haven't got money to do it. It's up to the city.
I do know that UTA is looking at that trail all along. I met with them today in a Clearfield situation. So they're re-looking at the use of it, and I think they would be at least receptive.
Mm-hmm. So, Josh, why do you think that additional traffic signaling won't help much?
Oh, it'll help.
You said lipstick on a pig, which to me means
well,
not much.
There are still going to be people crossing the traffic lanes. Period. No,
at grade.
At grade. There's, you know what I mean? So there's going to be that conflict of humans and cars, regardless of how many lights or what have you that are there.
People
if
still
you're
get
if you're
hit and
over the
signalized.
road or under the road, that is 100% off the table. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
How much approximately does it cost to do an overpass?
That could be a couple million.
Oh, that much?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a conversation that needs to happen regardless of what goes on here.
Yeah, because we're going to have, whether it's commercial or residential, there's going to be increased traffic either way. And just running a few numbers, it's and I think some from the traffic studies we've done before and some of the other things we've looked at, it's almost equal.
Yeah, we talk about 10 or 11 trips per unit.
Yeah, well, you got, I think what we figure some of the statistics were, like 3.5 drivers or something like that.
Yeah, a typical
6 trips or something.
Single-family residence on average generates about 10 trips a day per household. And so if you had 10 homes, it's 100 trips. We may be slightly above that typical average based on our household size and number of drivers. So you're just above 10, I think, per home.
Every time Smith adds another company in there, it adds, and we have no control, so I don't know that we can
So
control all
there's
of that.
traffic is a concern really regardless of what goes there, residential or commercial. It's got to do something, and unfortunately people, both pedestrians and car drivers, some of them don't pay attention. Some of it's driver's fault, some of it's pedestrian's fault.
I think
pedestrian loses either way.
Yeah.
So
I think general commercial is a good use for that property because if you did make it into a multifamily residential, it would increase, the use of the crosswalk. It would increase people walking around. And
multifamily could end up with about 40 units on 5 acres.
Yeah, I mean, that would, I think, increase some of the problems that we're talking about. So I do think that it's, and I think that, yes, put in a really tall fence, do everything you can to buffer that area from the community and the neighbors and stuff. But I think that it's a good use of the property. And I think that it's a good idea to put it there. I think it would benefit the community overall. And in terms of sales tax, it's not necessarily helping the community, but in terms of just a good use of the property, I think it does. So.
Well, compared to a retail commercial center, the traffic flow is going to be a lot less.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, it seemed like from the comments that we had, there were 2 adjacent landowners, if I remember correctly. Their issues were mostly a wall, which in the agreement Ogden Clinic agreed to do, at least a 6-foot wall, and would probably consider an 8-foot wall. There we go. That's one issue resolved. A few more trees. I think maybe you can you're right behind him, twist his arm while you have him now. Ask for a few more trees, he'll probably give that to you. We've solved the problems with the adjacent landowners. The other owners that live nearby, please let me finish. Our comment time is over. Thank you. The other owners have a buffer of the trail. I've gone out and walked that entire length of property. you have a backyard, you've got green space, you've got a trail. There's a tremendous space between these. They're not right up to it like our other landowners that share a common border. And the other concerns were almost primarily, exclusively traffic, which I don't believe is Ogden Clinic's big issue here.
Well, and to put a point, it's
an issue.
It could be. I mean, it's going to be an issue regardless. We have
if
residential.
put
We have
houses
multifamily.
in.
We have
We're going to have an issue. If we put the clinic in, we're going to have an issue. I think this reduces the traffic a little bit. One of the concerns was, well, you can't turn left out of here. That's going to be too dangerous. West Davis corridor may actually be completed before the Ogden Clinic, at which point you're going to have people going the other direction.
Yeah, it's going to flow
so,
west.
Yeah, it's going to change that traffic flow tremendously because you're going to have people that aren't willing to take that second north to I-15. They're going to jump on West Davis corridor. I think that changes the dynamics of people trying to turn across and left. That was a major concern. If the Ogden Clinic isn't even going to break ground for a couple more years, West Davis corridor starts next year. They may be completed about the same time and would change the whole dynamics of that area. The traffic problem on Second North is not going away. I think from a planning standpoint, we need to address that, but I don't know that that's to be solved tonight.
Isn't it designed that you could add, at least from Flint to Angel, that you can add additional lanes?
Yeah, I believe it's a 60 or 66 foot wide right of way. So right now it's striped with median turn lane, one lane in each direction, and then very large buffered bike lanes. So there's room, I don't know what that does to the bike lanes, but technically to have an additional travel lane in each direction all the way out to West Davis corridor.
And change the center lane.
And it would keep the center turn lane intact.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to figure out how to solve that problem and put some real work on it to get that intersection fixed, regardless of what we do.
Can I throw out an idea that I'm not that I'm not entirely sold on, to be honest, but you know, what if we have the West Davis corridor that's on the horizon? We have, I think, a reevaluation of our general plan on the horizon, is what I understand. The relatively soon horizon. And I'm not usually one to say let's not decide anything, but this is a key intersection, and for a lot of reasons, good and bad. Bad because it's got problems that we have to deal with. Good because it has a lot of traffic and opportunities that come with that. If we say let's wait, then we can put some more thought into not just this property, but this whole area a little better, and maybe make better planning decisions as a result. So that's, I suppose, one possibility.
Lyle, in terms of the general plan, do we have until December 1st? Or only to add those housing components to not miss our funds?
Oh, sure. So the mandate that we're currently under with the state as far as changes or additions to our general plan are specific to the affordable housing element. That doesn't mean we couldn't look to address other items prior to that. We recently received some funding where we are working on that general plan. I suspect we may have to adopt some of those housing elements earlier just to meet that criteria. But the remaining elements could work well into next year before it's completed, just based on when, it may be fall before we even start. Once the funding's available, we get a consultant on board and get things ramped up and going, and they can take several months to even work through. So I think there's some elements of the general plan that we'll be working on with haste. We're welcome to address some of these other issues as well, but I think that more in-depth process with the consultant is going to go into next year to some degree or another, where we're really able to get the community input and feedback and outreach as part of that visioning and planning process.
You know, though, I did hear Ogden Clinic say that they would work and do whatever needed to be done. So, well, we're planning, but they need to also be planning. So I think, you know, to make them wait would be, because they'll work with us and do what needs to be done.
Well, and I agree with that. And if they didn't want to wait, that of course would be their business call. But if they just either A, bought the property outright, or B, sat on an option that they probably have, is what I'm guessing, it just means they sit on it a little longer, and there wasn't going to be construction until late 2020 at the earliest, it sounded like. But at the same time, we don't necessarily have to make our planning decisions based on Ogden Clinic, whether we like them or not. I mean, it seemed like good business and good people, but we don't have to let their concerns dictate, of course.
I kind of would argue that, even though, yes, we are waiting for the general plan to be finalized by the city, I think we can kind of see what's going on, though. There's there's Smith's, that's general, commercial, this is commercial, this is commercial. I can't imagine the general plan coming back and changing that and making it all residential. So that being said, I agree with Betty. I think that we could probably make a recommendation, and if City Council decides to table it or make them wait for the general plan, then I guess it's their prerogative at that point. So.
Well, and I guess here's what I was thinking, and of course I probably kind of let the cat out of the bag. I was thinking, what are these two properties doing? Because if you look at it, so they're not selling. I mean, we have to take that into account. But at the same time, in 50 years, are those going to be residential? I mean, do we care about 50 years? Probably not. Somebody else can. But, I mean, it's out there. So if you just say the Bible church was sold, let's say, and then this is all a big viable piece for whatever it is. I don't know. It's hard. This is really difficult. I would be willing to bet if we had a single-family residential developer in here that say, yeah, I don't want that piece. Mm-hmm. Maybe a multifamily residential developer would want that, but we know how that went across the street. So we say, okay, what if this was if we're just planning, we're not looking at practicalities. Planning looks at what's, maybe longer term. Correct me if I'm wrong, Will. Planning perspective, longer term, this whole corner is a little more prime. This one over here is also more prime. Is that something we want to look at? Like I said, I'm not sold on the whole concept, but would be part of the idea.
Josh, help me out here. If you're thinking that whole thing is commercial, unless...
I didn't say commercial, but...
Well, as a possibility.
Okay.
You were saying the Bible church, those two other lots, this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
If we leave the zoning as is and someone just decides let's put houses in there, then we lose that forever. Our plan is out the window. So by making this general commercial, it actually seems like it gives us more flexibility with what we could do with those other lots in the future, because we're dealing with one owner, two owners, 3, 4 owners, as opposed to 20 owners, trying to convince all of them we want to do something different with this area. Somebody's come in, developed it, put single-family homes in, we've got to deal with 20 people and convince them, well, we wanted to plan it this way, so we're going to do this, as opposed to 4 owners who might be more amenable. So are you saying we shouldn't change it to general commercial because that leaves the flexibility for the other 3 to make a bigger lot? Or we should make a general commercial because that puts everybody sort of in the same boat? Sorry, I was just kind of lost on where you were going.
I'm saying if we waited for a discussion about a revision to our general plan, which would include, as we've talked before, a general plan map.
Right.
Then we get to paint the picture of what we think this whole section would look like, and same with that section. Is that general commercial? I don't know. Is that what we want? Do we want it to be all single-family residential? Do we want it to be multifamily residential? Do we want it to be mixed use? Those are questions that we answer in the general plan process, that we look at a longer term and a 30,000 foot level, whereas right now we're looking at this property, that property, this owner, what's this, you know what I'm saying?
Right, okay.
That's what I'm saying. So I wasn't saying let's commit ourselves to this all be general commercial or whatever. I'm saying if we waited, we can answer those questions at a broader scope that might, in theory, result in a better planning decision.
Laura, what kind of timing do you think we're looking at for the plan update?
So here's what I believe will happen. So we're currently working on a strategic plan, which will give some direction and vision, but it'll be probably less specific than our general plan and the maps and things that we're hoping to get out of that. The funding that we have for it comes through WFRC and their Transportation Land Use Connection Program, if I remember what it's called correctly. It's not even available till July 1st, so we can't start even going after consultants and assistants to help us through that process. And I believe because we're also already going through this other similar process, just based on our time frame and capacity, we'll probably be well after July 1st before we've got the bandwidth to take on the additional plan. So I'm looking at fall, probably late fall of this year's, probably an optimistic scenario to dive into and start the general plan.
Even get it started. Yeah.
The process is not particularly fast.
Yeah.
I was involved in it last time, and Betty, you were even more so.
I would suspect easily 6 months. I mean, if we want to get as much community input and outreach as we really hope to, it's going to take us a while to get started and a while to finish.
You know, I agree with bits and pieces of all of it. I think that we do need to have better long-range planning. You know, the things that got me interested in this years ago was looking at 200 North and some of the planning that happened years ago, or the lack thereof. And I think we do have to have good master planning and general planning to anticipate the growth, but I also see it as a living document that needs to be probably addressed and looked at every few years as our city changes, our needs change, the economics change. But I don't think that we as a body should wait until that general plan's done to make decisions. Otherwise, we become an ineffective body if we're waiting, you know, to make decisions. This is kind of unique because of where it's at and the trail system in there with the crosswalk there. But I tend to agree with you that I think we do need to move on it. We do need to make a motion on it and forward that on to the city council, rather than wait until we get a general plan revision.
I agree, and it seems like to me that we, at least I feel like it's that the parcel up against 200 North it's primed to be commercial, and I don't think it's gonna. And I don't see it going any other direction, especially in light of the freeway that's going to come in and the exit that's going to be there. If we assume that, then what's, that parcel behind it is kind of stuck.
Not really usable, not very feasible.
And if we can get a commercial use in there that's manageable and is not as bad as a lot of other choices would be as far as traffic and strain on that intersection, then I think we're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's zoned RA. I just don't see much RA type development going in that area because of what's already there and what's contemplated. And I agree. I think it's going to become something else. I think commercial, professional, office, which is what this more or less is, or it could be multifamily. or a higher density residential, because that's, what was proposed just to the west on the other side. From that standpoint, I think you take a look at what's being proposed, and it seems reasonable to me, what's being proposed here.
Let me ask a question. The property behind that, the long strip, is that what we're talking, the property there?
It's part of this, yeah, but there's two parcels.
Could we ever do something in the agreement to have a right-of-way or something to access that along? You know what I mean? Some type of access if we did that commercial behind it.
But it doesn't it look like, isn't it necessarily mean it's got to go through somebody else's property to get there?
Right, but right now, could we do something like a right-of-way on the edge of it or something?
I don't know.
I think they need all that space for parking, it sounded like.
Oh.
No, that's what I think part of the advantage of this current configuration and that Ogden Clinic is proposing is that it takes up both, that and uses that second parcel and doesn't require if someone else owns that parcel, what are they going to do with it?
Okay.
And I think in another 20 years, like you're saying, Josh, that whole piece could be commercial, but we know that that's not going to happen for quite a while. At least we hope, right?
At least 20.
You hope it lasts.
Hopefully longer.
Well, I guess I would want to next focus on the development agreement and whether we can get out of the development agreement what we need to get to feel comfortable about putting this in commercial. That's my question. And obviously the 6 feet to 8 feet fence, staff doesn't have any issue with 8-foot fencing around the.
Yeah, for us,
that's not an issue, right?
One way or another, it doesn't matter how it impacts the developer and neighbors is where that, I think, comes into play more than our issues.
Developers seemed open to that, and we are, and the residents, that's one of the issues. Like Tom said, Tom kind of walked us through how we can solve some of those problems quite easily, and I would like to make sure that happens in the development agreement. And then I don't know how we can put the traffic reconfiguration, resignaling, et cetera, on Ogden Clinic, but I want to make sure that before we rezone this, that we fix that, or at least try to solve some of those problems.
Is that already on the radar screen of the council or the city in general?
I think a little difficult to say if it is. I think this process is certainly putting it there, if it's not been previously. So we, I'm going to get the time frame a little wrong here, but 2 or 3 years ago installed that overhead signal. So we've known it's an area of concern. We got some funding to improve it to where it's at. So sounds like, and I would agree, it's far from ideal on being the perfect intersection. But prior, there was no PED-activated signal. We shortened the distance on the walk the way that we reconfigured it, and so yeah, the city is interested in making that a safe place. And I think we've heard some good ideas on maybe some things we could do with access, turn movements, restricting, or how we allow those going forward. So. So the short answer is, yeah, I think it's been known. I think this is highlighting that as an issue, and we'll continue to look at it as a city to find solutions.
Number 6 on assignment. Maybe one of the attorneys would know better on this, but so it can be assigned to another third party, provided that the city, agrees to it, and it can't be unreasonably withheld. But it says that such third party has the financial ability to perform developer's obligation hereunder. So does that mean that if they do assign it to someone else, they have to build what was agreed upon? They can't come in and say, we don't want to build this, we want to do something different?
Yeah, so whatever parameters are set within this agreement passes from owner to owner. So 8-foot fence, for example, if that's what it's going to be.
So that would resolve some of the concern that was expressed that if they decide not to do it, they can't just
Correct.
Give it
Yeah.
to somebody else to do whatever they want to
And,
do.
and the development agreement's recorded against the property?
Yeah, we can record them on the property so that as it passes through title, they'll see it, and
It doesn't look like it's set up to do that, but is that part of the plan, or is that something we need to?
it probably isn't set up to do it, but we could correct the language so that it's more easily put against it.
I mean, it can be, it doesn't.
Yeah, you can record
doesn't look like
anything on
it's
there.
set that way, yeah.
Yeah, so that, I wanted to clarify that. Then we talked about the fence thing and then the tree thing. I know 25 feet apart, I don't know what kind of trees are planning on planting, but if, depending on the size and tree, that's only a 12 and a half foot on each side before they'd grow together. I think maybe define what type of trees would be planted in there, and that would probably give us appropriate spacing between the trees.
And maybe what we do is define what effect we want. Do we want to have a, total blockage or kind of obscuring of the view or something like that? Because, like you say, it all depends on what kind of tree you have and how fast it grows and how close together they are. So.
Yeah.
When somebody mentioned lighting and just making sure that it wasn't going to be a attraction, anyway, but that's kind of addressed in here, right? Under the lighting? Just that it's acceptable and it will reflect away, and does that take care of that, do you think?
Well, and we can put time limits on.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
most
true.
medical office buildings and the one we've done, they have building lights that we've set times to turn off. I don't know what the plan is in the parking lot, but even with what we did at Smith's with that lighting there, with the down lighting and lower lighting, I think when we were going through the other proposal, some of the neighbors said there's still a little bit of light pollution that comes through, but I don't know what is planned for the parking lot.
I mean,
there.
it says right here, parking lot lighting shall be, this is what, 2, 3.
Okay, yeah,
It says
number
parking
3.
lot lighting shall be on a timer system so that it can be turned off after hours. Down lighting on buildings may be allowed to remain on after hours.
And I think they were talking about the signage in front, weren't they? That they wanted to make sure that that was off during off hours, so.
Well, I guess the question is, I guess we do during the winter times, if they got into the urgent care center, we do need lighting in the parking that would be on poles.
Well, does this lighting language satisfy your concern, our concerns, the neighbors' concerns? I mean, it seems like it addresses it. I don't know if it's specific enough, but when it's got a timer and it's down lighting and it doesn't affect the adjoining property uses, that seems to me to cover it. But maybe there's better language out there. I don't know.
I'm wondering if it says timer. I'm wondering if it's on a sense or two or something like that. So versus a timer, but.
Well, don't necessarily want a sensor because then late at night it would turn on.
Yeah.
We don't want that. So I think the ability to control it is, yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, it probably does.
I think it does, but.
I think it does.
All right, well, are we ready for a motion? It sounds like the consideration of the fence/wall, trees, are part of what we want to add to this and make sure the development agreement runs with the land. And you brought up the assignability provision, so.
And I think that was answered to where they can't just do whatever.
Josh, I ask you this directly, this assignment provision, I'm trying to find it now.
Number 7.
Making me a little nervous because it says consent shall not be unreasonably withheld, and then it said on a showing of the willingness to undertake the obligation, but my concern is, what if the city, what if the assignee says, oh yeah, I'll take on the obligation, but the city doesn't think it's going to do a good job of it? That, I'm a little worried about whether they can reject the assignment based on that language, which seems a little flexible.
Well, I mean, it would have to be, at least the way I read it, comes down to what's unreasonably withholding.
Right, and does that upon a showing qualify whether it's reasonable or not, or is that are there two elements there?
If they can show that they have the financial ability to perform all the obligations, then to me, the city would not be able to withhold consent.
Yeah, that's what it seems like to me. It doesn't necessarily allow the city to decide, well, maybe you're got the money, but you're a slumlord and you don't ever fix stuff. We know your reputation, so we don't like you. No consent. And then they sue on that basis for say it's unreasonably withheld. So I guess what I'm saying is I'd like to have that separated.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you'd say something like, move that language to before which consent shall develop upon a showing, like start off the sentence, upon a showing of satisfaction of the city, blah, 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 comma, developer may assign this. That's what I would recommend. Because then you have, my point is, you don't, once the assignee shows it has the financial ability, you may not have any discretion at that point.
Yeah.
Based, if you read it one way.
I mean, I think that's the way it's written right now. And, if it stayed written that way, I guess one argument on the flip side would be that they would have to perform everything that's already in the development agreement, and that would, in theory, give you what you wanted, what the city had contracted for, regardless, whoever does it.
Right. Right. I'd like to have the city have some consent, so have more discretion in the consent. So I'd recommend that we move that language, but it could go either way.
Financial ability, change it to just ability. Not that you have the money to do it, but that you have the ability to do everything that you've promised.
Yeah. Again, I just think it limits the city's, considerations.
You could just say, revise the assignment clause.
Yeah.
In a recommendation, you would recommend that.
Or even take out that last upon a showing of. But yeah, I think that's fine.
You could just say, this is what I hope to accomplish and what I hope doesn't happen with the assignment clause, and that's part of a recommendation. Yeah. And then Nick gets to revise it.
Yeah, ultimately, I'll make him listen to your conversation.
Yeah.
Not just skip to this part. I want the whole thing from 7 o'clock. Okay. All right.
I'm wondering if it might do well, and I don't know exactly what the wording would be, but to have a professional outline what the best access control would be to and from the property. Because somebody made the point, really good point, about turning left really close to that crossing, to that crosswalk. And maybe that would be a good thing, is to limit that, at least as long as the crosswalk is as it currently is, so that there isn't a left turn from there. I know the closer you get to the intersection, that makes problems too. So it might be good for somebody to really take a look at that and see what should be done, what needs to be done to design that access to and from the property.
Can we have an Ogden Clinic shoulder the burden of presenting viable options? I think that's...
Well, can you zoom in like you did before on that? Because here's the thing. There's not enough... I mean, now I understand that this isn't a surveyed lot line, but the way that if this yellow line is where the lot line is, or pretty darn close to it, those you cannot line up. They will not be directly lining up with each other.
Yeah.
So if you did have something and you wanted a left turn, you'd have conflicting lefts.
Right.
Someone turning left here, someone turning left there. That's bad news.
And somebody turning right out of Smith's too.
So what you'd have to have, if there was something here, it would have to be a right in, right out.
Yeah.
And there's a little pork chop concrete thing that people don't ever listen to. and they just drive over. But, I mean, that's what you'd probably have to do if there was an entrance right there.
Yeah.
Is that
Because
the technical term, a little pork chop thing?
They actually do
Hey,
call it that.
where's my civil engineer? They do call those things pork
They
chops.
actually do call
See?
it that, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Just checking to make sure.
But thing, pork chop thing, probably not. The pork chop part, yes.
I knew Josh was using a term of art.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I would like to see something in there with regard to an access management configuration or a plan or something, because I think that's going to be important out of that property, particularly not only with the crosswalk, but with the Smith's development across the street as well.
I agree. Okay.
Okay, so lights, walls, trees, left turns.
Yeah.
Would, and we'll maybe let the clinic speak to it, would, on that particular note with access management, not having the full site design, although without too much imagination, you probably know where they want to come in and out. Are you comfortable saying specific movements, or would you want language in there saying prior to approval of a site plan or building construction, the planning commission shall see
Yeah, that would be good.
the site plan for review of access?
Is this something the planning commission, the planning commission going to see the site?
Yeah, typically not. So it's a permitted use for office in the zone, so you wouldn't see it otherwise. That could be language
And
that
I don't
gives you
even
that option.
feel like at least I don't feel like I have the expertise to say, yes, that's right, or no,
Sure.
that's wrong. So I'd like to have the expert figure it out and the staff say, yeah, that works, or not.
I would agree with that.
Good. And that would be, okay, yeah, I think we got it.
Okay. Who's ready to go on this? Will? Gary said you were.
He did?
You look like you're ready to go.
I would make a motion to recommend to the city council to approve the request to rezone the 4.7 acres of property at approximately 1325 West 200 North from RA Residential Agricultural Zoning District to the General Commercial GC Zoning District, subject to the development agreement as presented with the addition of the access management that we just talked about, the access management provision.
Do you want to add
the fence or
fence and the
Yeah.
trees and the assignment?
Sure, yes, absolutely. I didn't list all the details of that, so if one of you has the details for that, or if we need, or if you have it, Lyle.
Do you mind me reading off what I have
That'd
here
be great.
to see if they're accurate? So, clarifying that the wall or fence shall be 8 feet in height or as a minimum, additional trees, and I don't have a specific direction on that, but to beef up the amount of trees as a buffer for property lines, ensure that it's a recorded document against the property, enhance the assignment clause, and Nick will listen to your discussion and desires
Yeah,
on
just
interest there.
More discretion for this city.
To provide more discretion for the city, and then the access and turn movement that you've addressed. And so we'll get to work on the actual semantics and language of that, should the motion pass, and the council can look at that in additional detail, and you would have the chance to see that through that process.
I think that sounds good. Is that your motion?
Yes.
Do we have a second? Okay, great.
Second.
Thank you.
Is it me?
I believe it's Josh.
So let me just explain.
This is just a yes or a no.
I know,
at this point.
yeah. So you can probably guess what I'm going to say. I'm not afraid to make the non-politically correct answer, the non-popular answer, but I think that there should be more planning done around here. And so I'm not inherently opposed to this. I just think that we should wait and get a better plan for this. So I say nay to that.
Aye.
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 I don't disagree with what Josh says. I think, some more planning for that area is really important.
Well, we are the planning commission. So
Right, but I think the trends are showing us what's happening in that area, and I think this is not that out of place for where we'd probably wind up.
Yeah.
So I vote aye.
I agree.
Aye.
Okay.
So we agree with your nay.
Yeah. It's okay, I'm all right going out in left field.
Okay. All right.
So does Lyle, maybe for everybody here, what happens next with this?
Yeah, so for those interested in the Planning Commission, the next step is these rezones do need to go before the City Council. Excuse me. What I would anticipate on the timing, when it would be back, there's typically an every other meeting sort of delay from when we're able to get on the agendas for the City Council. We've got an extra week at the end of May, so it's possible that it's on for the 6th. The most likely and typical scenario would be the 20th before the City Council sees it. So watch the agendas with that, and ultimately the City Council, they'll listen to the recommendation of the Planning Commission, that may agree with it, may have a different opinion.
Do they do a
They
public
get the
hearing
final
as
say.
well on this?
So the City Council's format, they don't have a public hearing the way that we have it through the Planning Commission and our bylaws. It's not a mandated public hearing, but what they do allow is the mayor lets anyone on an action item, which this would be on their agenda, to sign up ahead of the meeting, and I think she'll allow up to 10 people to sign up per item and give them 3 minutes apiece to speak to it. So there will be opportunity at the City Council level at that meeting to speak. To be safe, the public's always welcome to reach out to council members elsewhere as well and share concerns or comments should that be necessary.
Yeah, so that's definitely something I'd encourage if again, we're a recommending body on this. The City Council is the legislative body on it, and so I'd recommend if you want to stay involved and your voice be heard to do that, but be early so you can sign up, because they do take the cards, and if you haven't signed up, you don't get the opportunity.
Okay. Next is a call to the public. This is another opportunity for you to address the commission if you'd like.
Can I just leave, these were the maps that I just brought with you guys.
Yeah. Please.
In case you sleep on it and decide that residential is the right thing to do, these are just the maps from Symphony Homes. And so just so you can see that you can put a smaller home in that spot and keep that side of 200 North residential, because, if you take a look at it, some of these properties are like, 0.3, a third of an acre, and so it would actually fit very nicely in that area, and then you wouldn't have that problem with commercial against commercial with the left-hand turns, and so I just thought. And you guys could solve tonight. You could solve your Main Street issue with these guys. They can build their property on your. Seriously, you've got a win-win here. Anyway.
May I ask, are those identical copies? We may take one of them for our record as well. So
Okay.
Thank you.
So those are all three the same. So, or I can email you. And I have a question for you.
Okay.
Oh, can I ask a light question about 2 light questions? Okay. So here's my other questions, and the one is on 200 North as you're heading east in the evening, 200 heading west in the morning. The lights, the left turn lights, are always only yellow flashing. So in the evening, if you're trying to go somewhere north on Flint Street, you have to wait through like almost the whole light and wait till the light's turning yellow, and then somebody still wants to zoom through the light. So if you guys, I put in a request for this about a year ago before this Ogden stuff even started, to make that a dedicated green light for 1 or 2 or 3 cars that want to turn left. So that was one thing. And then the other thing as far as lighting is across the way, there's the new fizz that got put in, And for some reason, I thought that they were bound to the night sky type of lighting, but their light that faces 200 North is like super bright, and that's what I see from my house at night. And then the Costa Vida or something else is going in right next to it. And so that light is going to be, bothersome to, everybody that's in the neighborhood. So, I thought about contacting, the management at Fizz, but I thought, well, maybe since I'm here, you guys might be able to answer that question. So.
Thank you. Is that the Fizz letters, their store sign lighting that you're referring to?
Soda thing that, and it's real bright. And once they put it up, I was like, wow, that doesn't look like it's night sky compliant. So when people make promises, they don't always keep them, so.
That was, yeah. As far as the turn signals goes, I think the JUB study shows that they could optimize the signals.
Yeah, it sounds like the similar issue.
Yeah, and like I said,
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've been asking, I sent in a request over a year ago on that one, so.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Just a couple of issues. I've never been to one of these meetings before, and I appreciate you guys listening and taking into account all the stuff we brought up. Have you guys discussed the traffic mess that exists just barely west of the freeway during rush hour? When people get off the freeway and try to turn left onto Old Mill Lane by crossing 3 lanes of traffic
Quickly,
in 20 feet?
We've discussed that. It's come up a number of times. We're not the deciding body on that, but
there's a few of the things that have resulted was the restriping of the overpass, and it is a collector from Desert Drive coming in.
I mean, I've been home on days where the traffic is backed up all the way out onto the freeway, and that's a major traffic hazard.
yeah, that's a problem.
The other question I have is there any plans to fix Sunset? It is the worst paved road in North America, as far as I can tell.
Well, they're working on Shepherd right now, which I thought was the worst, so maybe they're creeping up.
Sunset Drive, at least a portion of it's one of this year's projects, and
Mine was just a question, and she was kind of wondering it too. So when you guys were talking about like revising like the agreement, so is that kind of saying that if it does change hands, they have to follow what's in the development plan? I guess that was just the part that you kind of lost me.
Right, one of the specific things was that it would be recorded against the property, so whoever buys the property buys it subject to that development agreement.
That's why I was asking a lot of clarification to ensure that that was the case, that they couldn't decide, hey, we don't want to do this, let's sell it to, we're going to sell it to
yeah, because that just, like I said, is a big concern. So will they have to revise the development plan before City Council has it? Is that then kind of what will happen?
Yeah, based on their direction, we'll make those changes so that the City Council sees what the Planning Commission has requested.
Okay.
In the development, agreement.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, we're going to close the call to the public and open it up to a very concise and quick discussion of our calendar and notes and reports, etc.
Yeah, just in short, I'll send an email. There's another Land Use 101 training for anyone who's interested, so they're starting to ramp those up again. We'll be meeting second Thursday again in June, but beyond that, I don't have other reports or items to bring before you unless you have some for me.
No. Someone want to move to adjourn?
I'll move.
So moved.